Okay, hello everyone. I believe we are now live. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the council meeting for on the 27th of January 2022, which I now declare open. In light of the current COVID numbers, council has opted to hold tonight's meeting online. Our meetings, of course, remain open to the public via live stream on our website, and I extend a warm welcome to all of you who are watching. So on behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the land on which Moonee Valley is located, that of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend this respect to any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here tonight. Now, councillors, I do have an apology from Councillor Sypek for tonight, who doesn't believe he will be able to make it to tonight's meeting. Can I please have a motion that the apology for Councillor Sypek be noted? That is moved. Councillor Bedio, second Councillor Tyson. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 4 on the agenda is the confirmation of minutes, and it was a while ago. But councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday the 14th of December 2021 be confirmed? That is moved. Councillor Bedio, seconded Councillor Tyson. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Declarations of conflict of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest on any item on the agenda this evening? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll declare a conflict of interest in report 10.1, 33 Dean Street, Moonee Ponds, for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO in writing.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Anybody else? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a conflict of interest in 10.1, 33 Dean Street, Moonee Ponds, due to reasons previously disclosed to the CEO. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to disclose conflict of interest on notice of motion 2022-01, Mount Alexander Road Tramworks, for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to declare a conflict of interest on any item on tonight's agenda? No, I too would like to declare a conflict of interest on item 10.1, 33 Dean Street, for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO in writing. Presentations is item 6 on the agenda tonight, which is really exciting, being our first meeting back. Obviously, yesterday was Australia Day, which was lovely. And we're also really excited to say that the Australia Day honours list, and we do have a few people from the municipality. Now, this might not be a full list, so we may add to it next meeting, but I would, on behalf of council, would really like to congratulate Dr. Faye Bendrips for service to the performing arts, particularly through music, Mr. Desmond O'Keefe for service to horse racing, Mr. Michael Slocum for his service to performing arts as an entertainer, and to Miss Elizabeth Williams for outstanding public service to electoral management in Victoria. The Australian Day Honours Program it's very exciting to have members from Moonee Valley receive some of those awards. So congratulations, that's a fantastic effort. Yes, I think I can see Councillor Hodgson clapping, so I know I'm the only one. I hope my sound comes through. That's great. Now, does anybody else have any presentations for tonight? Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, yesterday I had, and many councillors here, I think all councillors here, joined us for the annual Bunjil Maroon Healing Ceremony at Woodlands Park. The healing ceremony is run by council every year in conjunction with the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung elders, as an acknowledgement that the 26th of January is a day with many mixed emotions. For some, it's a day to celebrate, but for our First Nations people, it's a day of sorrow and loss. I think it's our duty as Australians not only to acknowledge, but to listen and to understand the experience of our First Nations peoples. And I'm so thankful to our officers for running such an important event, and to our community for coming out in such a large number despite the heat. I think that just goes to show how valued this event is in our community. Especially like to thank Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung elders, Annie Diane Kerr, Auntie Gail Smith, Uncle Jack Charles, as well as the Nundu Togip dance group, for sharing your stories, performance, and enriching us with your culture. It was such a fantastic day. I always feel so enriched after it. And it's something I hope we continue to do long into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Very, very well said. Do we have any other presentations this evening? No, so we'll move on to petitions and joint letters. Councillors. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to table a petition. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Council has received a petition with 99 signatories requesting council to create more parking in the Strathmore shopping village. Of the signatories received, 87 were considered valid and 12 signatories were not considered to meet the criteria for a valid signatory. I'd like to move that council resolves to A, receive and note the hard copy petition regarding the request to create more parking in the Strathmore shopping village. B, refer this matter to the Director of Enabling Services for investigation and reporting back to council, and C, advise the petition organiser accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. That's so moved. Do I have a seconder for that motion? That's Councillor Nation. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. I believe there is a second petition or joint letter tonight. Councillor Reiser.
I'd like to move that council receive and note the joint letter regarding the review of parking and patrol processes and enforcement of residential parking permits during events in the municipality, and B, refer this matter to the Director of Enabling Services for investigation and reporting back to council, and C, advise the joint letter organiser accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Reiser. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Right, we are now on to public question time, and we have received 8 questions from the community for tonight's meeting. As we do not have the submitters of the questions in the public gallery tonight, I propose that we move to suspend the provisions in our governance rules requiring questioners to be present in the gallery. That will enable me to read the questions that have been submitted in advance and for the CEO to read the responses. Councillors, may I please have a mover that council resolves to temporarily suspend the public question provisions in its governance rules to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and responses read out by the CEO for this meeting. Move Councillor Bedio, seconded Councillor Tyson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So the first question put to council this evening, first one for the year. Well done, Daniel Cameron. So the first question is, in Daniel's words, I live in a heritage overlay area and would like to install solar panels. In my pre-application meeting, the council heritage advisor informed me that the council's declaration of a climate emergency had no impact on how the council assesses what is considered an acceptable location for solar panels in a heritage overlay area. Is the council planning to relax these requirements to further encourage solar uptake? If so, when is the earliest time I would be able to install solar panels with higher street level visibility than is currently required? And I will pass to our CEO, Helen Speed, for a response.
Thank you, Daniel. Through the Mayor, it is acknowledged that Council has declared a climate emergency. However, this declaration does not amend the decision guidelines within the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme or the Heritage Guidelines 2016. Currently, a planning permit application is required to be submitted pursuant to Clause 43.01-1 Heritage Overlay to construct a solar energy system attached to a building that primarily services the land on which it is situated, if the services are visible from a street other than a lane or public park. As such, while Council encourages the uptake of solar panels within heritage areas and an assessment of the visual impact of the panels due to the location is needed to be undertaken to balance the environmental benefits of solar power with with the heritage significance of a building or precinct. Therefore, Council has implemented the following strategies to encourage the uptake of solar panels in heritage overlay areas. First, the waiver of fees associated with requesting a heritage pre-application meeting for applications only involving the installation of solar panels. Second, is a reduction in the fees by 50% for the lodgement of planning applications for the installation of solar panels in a heritage overlay. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you for your question, Daniel. The next two questions this evening come from Paul Avery. Thank you very much for your questions, Paul. Paul's first question reads, regarding the heritage assessment process within heritage overlay areas, if during the building application process a fundamental difference in the interpretation of heritage qualities has been raised, does Council have a documented heritage assessment review process, in brackets HARP, to evaluate/change the recommendation of Council's heritage consultant? Thank you, and I'll pass to the CEO, Helen Swee, for a response.
Thank you, Paul. Through the Mayor, the short response is no. In providing this response, it is assumed the reference to building application process in the question includes the planning permit application process. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Paul's second question reads, if the answer to question 1 is no, will Council consider adding a HARP process to the current building application processes? And he also wrote, if the answer to question 1 is yes, why was this process not mentioned in the recent meetings regarding the building application at 17 Cook Street? Brackets note, at these meetings, Council has stressed that with regards to heritage overlay, they made their decision on the basis of the heritage consultant's recommendations. Thank you, Paul, for your question. Helen, if you can please respond.
Thank you, Paul. Through the Mayor, Council officers, when assessing an application, will consider all material submitted by the permit applicant, objectors, and Council's heritage advisor in determining whether application meets the relevant decision guidelines of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. This material may include heritage reports from heritage consultants commissioned and submitted by permit applicants or objectors. When received these reports are reviewed by Council's heritage advisor. It is the role of the assessing officer to review the various material submitted and Council's heritage advisor's comments and make a balanced decision against the relevant decision guidelines within the planning scheme when making a recommendation to Council on whether or not to support an application. As such, there is no need for a heritage assessment review process, noting the planning legislation makes provision for reviews through the Victoria Civil and Administrative Tribunal. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you, Paul, for your questions. Now, the next two questions for Council come from Brian Duggan. Thank you, Brian, for your questions. Brian, first question of Council is, in Brian's words, I would like Council to explain how a proposed residential density of 135 dwellings per hectare at 40 to 42 Buller Road can be considered acceptable. The proposal is almost double the nearby 72 dwellings per hectare residential density at 19 Buller Road. The Moonee Valley Planning Scheme Clause 02.03-1 settlement amended on the 19th of June 2020 C193 Moon states the development plans for precinct DD03 precinct A, the location of the development in question should be moderate. Schedule 3 to clause 43.02 Design and Development Overlay states that the Mount Alexander Road Corridor Urban Design Guidelines 2010 must be applicable for this area. CEO, can you please respond?
Thank you, Brian. Through the Mayor, the assessment of the planning permit application and the consequent increase in density does not rest on one measure or one metric, such as dwellings per hectare. Rather, consideration is given to an assessment against many considerations such as neighborhood character, site layout, and building massing, overdevelopment, on-site amenity, off-site amenity impacts, car parking and traffic impacts, waste management, and stormwater and drainage. Council seeks to provide a balanced outcome for all stakeholders through a fair, equitable, and rigorous assessment of any proposal against the relevant requirements of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. Consequently, it is considered that proposal is in line with the above-mentioned requirements as the development provides generous setbacks, suitable overall height, appropriate levels of massing, sufficient car parking, and compliance with environmentally sustainable principles, allowing for the moderate increase in density to be absorbed in this context. Further discussion with regards to the proposal's compliance with the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme is detailed in the officer's recommendation in tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Brian's second question reads as follows. I'd like to ask Council why petitioning the state government to replace the level crossings at Park and Puckle Streets with Rail Lunga Road was omitted from the MVCC 2040 Planning for Our Future document when 6 of the 9 councillors ran election campaigns on agendas supporting the removal of mentioned level crossings. Again, in Brian's words, Helen, can you please respond?
Thank you, Brian. Through the Mayor, the removal of level crossings across Metropolitan Melbourne is the responsibility of state government. At this stage, the level crossings at Park Street and Puckle Street have not been identified as candidates for removal. Council's MV 2040 strategy states that Council will investigate the level crossings removals at Park Street and Puckle Street. In the event that the state government announces an intention to consider removing the level crossings at Park and Puckle Streets, Council will work closely with the relevant agencies to ensure that the best outcomes can be achieved for Moonee Ponds. Further, removing the level crossing is not something that has been raised at a council level as an advocacy priority, nor is it currently identified in Council's advocacy strategy, which was adopted by Council on 14 December 2021, and will guide our advocacy work for the next 3 years. The advocacy strategy was released as a draft for community engagement between 27th of October and 15th of November 2021. Among the 55 responses received, removing level crossing was not raised as a significant priority. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you very much for your questions, Brian. The next question this evening comes from Angie Wilton. Thank you very much for your question, Angie. The question is, there is a serious weed problem all along the gutters and curbs of Shield Street, Flemington, where masses of weeds and grass have grown between the bluestone pavers. The reason for this copious amount of weeds is down to the significant deterioration of the integrity of the curbs and gutters along the northern end of the street. Almost all the concrete and grouting between bluestone pavers is gone, and in some section, pavers are missing altogether. What is the council's plan to restore these significantly deteriorating curbs and gutters? In brackets, therefore reducing reliance on regular use of herbicides, as well as providing long overdue maintenance and heritage appeal. Thank you very much for your question, Angie. Helen, CEO, can you please respond?
Thank you, Angie. Through the Mayor, Council's cleansing team will arrange weed maintenance to be conducted along the channel and edges. Weeds around the tree base will be removed in the coming days, with the inspection of the bike hoop to occur with any repairs scheduled. In line with the Council's road management plan, the infrastructure maintenance team is going to inspect with the intention to reinstate missing curb, channel stone, while repairing any deteriorated sections. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you for your question, Angie. Now, the next two questions are from Caroline Robertaccio. Caroline asks Council, currently Buller Road Service Road already has overflow parking problems from the units that have been built at 28 and 34 Buller Road, and this is also impacting the collection of rubbish as there is not clear access for bin collection. It is also unsafe for us to exit our driveway. Given these existing issues, how will Council address this in the proposed development? CEO Helen Sway, can you please respond?
Thank you, Caroline. Through the Mayor, the proposed development will use private waste collection from a communal waste storage collection area located within the basement of the development. As such, the use of council services for waste collection along the nature strip will not be required. Council's waste management team has reviewed this arrangement and has deemed it to be acceptable, subject to compliance with specific recommendations relating to the basement ramps and industrial strength for the basement floor. With regards to the broader issue of traffic and car parking within the immediate area, it should be noted that the proposed development provides the required on-site parking required for residents pursuant to clause 52.06 car parking of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. In addition, Council's Traffic and Transport Unit had no objection to the proposal. Any ongoing issues relating to traffic and or parking pressures within the street need to be addressed through Council's Traffic and Transport Unit. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And thank you for that question. Our final question this evening is also from Caroline, and it reads, our understanding is that Council has set rules on what can be built within the planning scheme of Buller Road in line with the character, amenities and density of the area. Our question is, why is the Council ignoring its own planning scheme rules set for the Buller Road area by MVCC? And if the Council is in favour of this application, why set the planning scheme rules if they are going to be overridden? Again, in Caroline's words, and thank you very much for the questions. CEO, can you please respond?
Thank you, Caroline. Through the Mayor, all planning permit applications are subject to review against the relevant policies contained within the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. Council is not ignoring the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. In fact, Council has undertaken an assessment against the following relevant policies: Clause 02, Clause 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Clause 32.08, General Residential Zone. Clause 43.02, Design and Development Overlay Schedule 3. Clause 52.06, 52.29, 52.34, Clause 55, 65, 66.02, 71.0223, and 72.04. A review of the proposal against the planning policy and design guidelines has allowed officers to conclude that the proposal is acceptable subject to conditions. Further discussion with regards to the proposal's compliance with the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme is detailed in the officer's report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you to all members of the community who submitted questions. We now move to item 9 on the agenda, reports from delegated committees. I don't believe we have any councillors. No, in that case, before we move to item 10, I will just make note that we are operating under our new governance rules tonight for people who are tuning in at home. Obviously, myself and the councillors, we're going to do our absolute very best in how we do this, but please bear with us. There are some very slight changes. And myself, when I'm chairing items, obviously not the first item, we'll do the best, as will the Deputy Mayor when he's chairing an item, and obviously councillors will do their very best, but we will go as we can with these new governance rules. Great. So I will now, we're up to item 10, and having declared a conflict of interest in this item, I'll leave the chamber, and Deputy Mayor Councillor Bedio will chair, and as will Councillor Nathan and Councillor Sharp. If IT can put us to the wait room.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Item 10.1, 33 Dean Street, Moonee Ponds, use and development of a multi-storey building containing dwellings and offices, buildings and works in environmental significance overlay, ESO2, and a reduction in car parking requirements. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with 2 additional points, which I will read. So an additional point 1W to read: the building to provide a setback from the southern boundary at Kenner Street of at least 5 metres for the first 20 metres in height, and a further 5 metre setback to building elements above 20 metres in height to comply with clause 5.9-4 of Schedule 1 to the Activity Centre Zone. And then an additional 1.x, the building to be reduced in height to comply with the preferred maximum building height for sub-precinct 9B in clause 5.9-3 of Schedule 1 to the Activity Centre Zone.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So this application is coming to us as a revised version of an earlier proposed development, which was refused by Council and the decision upheld by VCAT. The original, the first part of the original application has come through the Chamber already, and so this sort of forms a Part B to that Stage B development. There are a number of conditions that the council officers have recommended that seek to bring the application into closer alignment with our planning scheme and other requirements for new developments. But what concerns me is that the planning scheme amendment that was made after a lot of hard work of an advisory committee represents a lot of compromise already on what is the best outcome for the whole development. And the application we're looking at tonight sits predominantly in sub-precinct 9B, which is identified as one that we should encourage predominantly residential development. So for this reason, the 2 things that concern me most are the maximum building height, which is exceeded in the plans, and the street setbacks for the future Kenner Street extension, which don't meet the guidelines for the precinct. And so I'm seeking to further condition those in this amendment, in this proposed motion. So at the moment, the application proposes a 0 metre setback to Kenner Street up to the 6th floor, which because there's a fall in the land and a lower ground and ground level at Kenner Street, it actually appears as an 8 metre, an 8-storey wall. For the previous application at this address that we considered, the wall was 7 stories, and I believe, as I did then, that the height of the wall as experienced from the pedestrian realm is not the outcome that was intended by the guidelines as they read. A key part of the applicant's level of comfort with their application is the conditional support of an urban design expert, Professor Rob McGowan. Professor McGowan's report does indicate that a handful of recommendations, if addressed, would satisfy him that the permit meets could be issued on urban design grounds. But the review doesn't really speak directly to this Kenner Street interface with a 0 setback. It refers to the realigned road that creates the Stone Pine Square as the application details. But it doesn't talk about the sheer wall and that experience of the pedestrian realm. So for that reason, it's really important to me that we consider the future amenity of residents and visitors to the area. And in particular, I think we need to make sure that the walkability of the area is preserved, and we ensure the guidelines on the street setbacks that were included in the planning scheme to meet those objectives are enforced through the granting of this permit. The other aspect is the maximum height. So for a building that proposes to exceed the maximum preferred height, the applicant has to demonstrate a net community benefit. Now, one of the rationales for a net community benefit in this example is providing, jobs through the construction process, and I think it's a real truism that construction creates jobs. So that's not really a lasting community benefit in my view. There will be, creation of some ongoing jobs through retail and commercial office space that has a community economic benefit, but one that creates a net community benefit to allow the exceedance of the height, I'm just not convinced. There's obviously an increase in the housing stock, and the affordable housing component of it is a requirement of the planning scheme. So all in all, the other sort of elements to it are provision of public open space and public art. But I note that these are requirements under a Section 173 agreement, which was entered into as a condition of the development as a whole. So while these things I do recognise offer a community benefit, they are things that I believe would otherwise need to have been delivered, either through planning scheme requirements or the conditions of the agreement. And for me, they just don't justify the exceedance of the preferred maximum height on the basis of a net community benefit. In my remaining moments, I just wanted to draw attention to a couple of the other conditions that are important in granting this permit. And those are the requirement for an expert arborist to revisit the conditions around protecting the significant trees in the area. They feature very prominently in the design, but we absolutely need to make sure that those trees won't be harmed either through construction phase or by any loss of sunlight through the built form. And there's also a further condition requiring an amended wind impact assessment, which I've spoken about the need for this development to consider walking and cycling and preserve the amenity of that for future visitors and residents.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isel, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Hodgson, for summarising those issues around the setbacks and the height and the net community benefit. I'll just add a couple of points and mainly speak to those 2 points as well, given that they're the amendments that we're putting forward for colleagues to consider. The applicant has reduced the height from its first proposal that was rejected by VCAT, so we note that, and it now exceeds the preferred maximum building height for sub-precinct 9B by just over 8 metres, which is about 25% of the 32-metre building. VCAT said at the previous decision that the preferred maximum heights have sound strategic purpose, and they're graduated such that the highest built form is to be at the lowest part of the entire site, and precinct 9B is not the lowest part of the site. It's where the existing grandstand currently is. Councillor Hodgson spoke to the community benefits that have been put forward to justify the exceedance of that height. It was also commented at VCAT in the previous decision that the affordable housing is in catch-up mode, as previous permits have failed to include affordable housing. And VCAT agreed that the provision of affordable housing should be facilitated as an ordinary occurrence. So I concur with the argument that Councillor Hodgson put forward. It was also stated that VCAT considered that any approval of heights excessively higher than the preferred maximum is likely to have a cumulative impact on the surrounding area. And so that was the basis of the advisory committee's recommendation to reduce the proposed heights when it went to the advisory committee many, many years ago. The advisory committee has already given very deliberate attention to the issue of heights, and sticking to this ensures the overall planning for the site is not undermined. Acknowledge that the applicant has done considerable work to put forward a different proposal to us, and that there are different views about this proposal, but we're ultimately guided by the Activity Centre Zone 1 and the requirements and objectives. And VCAT's commented that these are appraised as having sound strategic basis, and that departure from these will not achieve net community benefit. With respect to the minimum setbacks, it's somewhat disappointing that the report to council doesn't make it clear that the Kenner Street is a public road. That's now a non-contested, agreed fact across all parties, that Kenner Street extension will be a public road, and that the guidelines, Deputy Mayor, could I just request 1 extra minute if I may?
Yep, that's granted, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you. Because I just wanted to speak to the setbacks, because I do acknowledge that the setbacks are precinct guidelines, and that's been argued by the applicant that because they're guidelines, they don't need to be adhered to with such vigour. And I wanted to just note that in order to depart from the guidelines, the objectives still need to be met. And the objectives that are set out, the relevant objectives are, as Councillor Hodgson spoke to, the public amenity that encourages walking and cycling and the use of the pedestrian streets, the high quality pedestrian amenity, also the wind effects that might be experienced in areas where there's such built form and such sheer walls. VCAT commented in the previous decision again that the visual bulk due to the scale and height and the loss of landscaping opportunities, all of these features have a critical impact on Kenner Street. And this is important for providing a high quality pedestrian network. And it's for these reasons that I support the conditioning of the proposal to be consistent with our previous decision approval for Building 1, consistent with the precinct guidelines. And I hope that the applicant appreciates that we are trying to be consistent. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? None. There being none, as chair, I do have discretion to break the motion up. So what I'm going to do is we're going to vote for the motion in parts. We'll first vote for the additional condition 1W, then the condition 1X, and then the substantive. I believe that's allowed under governance rules. Can I just double check that's allowed?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Thanks, governance. So councillors, we'll vote for the amendment, the additional 1W, the building to provide a setback from the southern boundary at Kenner Street of at least 5 metres for the first 20 metres in height, and a further 5 metre setback to building elements above 20 metres in height to comply with clause 5.9-4 of Schedule 1 to the activity centre zone. Sorry, those for the motion, those for the, sorry guys, those for the addition. That motion is carried unanimously. The additional condition 1X, the building to be reduced in height to comply with the preferred maximum building height for sub-precinct 9B in clause 5.9-3 of Schedule 1 to the activity centre zone. Councillors for this addition? That's Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Tyson. Those against? It's Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio. That amendment, that addition is carried. We will now vote on the substantive. That is the to grant the permit with the additional 1W and 1X. Those councillors for the substantive? That's Councillor Adams, Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Tyson. Those against? Councillor Bedio. That motion is carried. Thanks, councillors. Can we please have the mayor in? And I apologise for my fumbling of words. Unfortunately, I had the first motion of the year.
Thank you. I believe we are back live. I'm just making sure we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 councillors. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Now go to item 10.2 on the agenda, which is 42 to 44 Buller Road, Strathmore, construction of a 3-storey building comprising of 21 dwellings and front fence exceeding a height of 1.2 metres in a design and development Schedule 3 overlay area, and alteration and creation of access to a road in a road zone Category 1. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative motion to refuse the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would you like to read out your motion?
Yes. I'd like to move that council issues a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV-890-2020 at 42 to 44 Buller Road, Strathmore, Lot 29 and Lot 30 on plan of subdivision 010839 for the construction of a 3-storey building comprising 21 dwellings and front fence exceeding a height of 1.2 metres in a design and development Schedule 3 overlay area, and alteration and creation of access to a road in a road zone category 1 in accordance with the following grounds of refusal. 1, the proposal fails to provide suitable waste collection facilities in accordance with clause 02.03-8, infrastructure-waste management, clause 15.02-1S, energy and resource efficiency, and clause 19.03-5, waste and resource recovery of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. 2, the proposal fails to meet the overarching objective and the strategies of clause 15.01-5S, neighbourhood character of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, and would result in a development that fails to appropriately respond and contribute to neighbourhood character. 3, the proposal fails to meet the provisions of clause 15.01-5L, neighbourhood character of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, as it does not respect or contribute to the preferred character of the Garden Suburban 6 precinct, and fails to appropriately respond to its location and surrounding context. 4, the proposal is inconsistent with the Mount Alexander Road Corridor Urban Design Guidelines 2010 as required by clause 6 of Schedule 3 to clause 43.02 Design and Development Overlay, and fails to satisfy the requirement, the objectives of the Mount Alexander Road Corridor Urban Design Guidelines 2010 as required by clauses 3 and 5 of Schedule 3 to clause 43.02 Design and Development Overlay of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. 5, the proposal fails to satisfy the design objectives of clause 42.02 Design and Development, that was clause 43.02 Design and Development Overlay Schedule 3, DDO 3 of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme due to its building height, appearance, amenity, streetscape, presentation, setbacks and precinct specific guidelines. Sorry, I'm just going to check that was right. Yep. Sorry. 6, the proposal fails to satisfy the following standards contained within clause 55, 2 or more dwellings on a lot of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, and does not achieve an acceptable outcome in terms of the following objectives. A, clause 55.02-1, standard B1, neighbourhood character. Clause 55.03-2, standard B6, street setback. C, clause 55.03-2, standard B7, building height. Sorry, bear with me. Clause 55. This is D. Clause 55.07-11, standard B45, waste and recycling, and E, clause 55.07-4, standard B48, windows. And 5, 7. There's been a few changes, sorry. And point 7, the proposal represents an overdevelopment of the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Can I ask for a seconder for that motion? Councillor Nation, thank you. And sorry, I probably should have checked because that was so long. Did everyone understand that motion, or does anyone need clarification in writing? There's just a general, yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Adams, for reading that all out. So I've got moved Councillor Adams, seconded Councillor Nation. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will. Thank you, Mayor. The location of this site is the eastern side of Buller Road, Strathmore, between the freeway and Woodland Street at the intersection of Buller Road and Cranwell Avenue. The site is affected by Design and Development Overlay DD03 and is located in Precinct A. In my opinion, the proposal fails to satisfy the design objectives of this precinct in the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, and this is further validated by the objectives set out in the Mount Alexander Road Corridor Urban Design Guidelines 2010 for Precinct A, which is a highly relevant document with regards to assessing this planning permit application, as DD03 makes direct reference to the compliance with the objectives set out in this document. The Mount Alexander Road Corridor Guidelines sets out each precinct and includes an urban design assessment and recommendations for the development of the private realm. In the guidelines, the existing character of Precinct A is described as follows. In quotation, the existing scale and pattern of tree planting, coupled with the generally low scale and larger setbacks of the adjacent predominantly residential built form, has resulted in a very open character. The built form is predominantly detached residential single to double-storey bungalow style housing and post-war brick housing. On page 48 of the Urban Design Guidelines, an opportunity that is explicitly stated for Precinct A is to reinforce the low-scale residential housing character of the precinct. It goes on to say intensification in this location would also result in significant change to the established neighbourhood character and likely require site consolidation that is unlikely to be desirable in this location. This is further supported in the Neighbourhood Character Precinct Profiles 2012, which is also referred to in the planning scheme under clause 15.01-5L. The relevant precinct in this document is Gardens Suburban 6, which states that that new developments should not dominate the streetscape. And in my opinion, this development will dominate and will not contribute to the character of the street. I mean, I could finish my argument here. We have these urban design guidelines, neighbourhood character profiles and planning scheme for a reason. We have a responsibility to ensure the preservation of this important gateway to Moonee Valley. If we start to allow developments such as 42 to 44 Buller Road, which will be the first of its kind in this site-specific context and immediate neighbourhood, it will absolutely be at the detriment of the open character of this precinct, as referred to in the guidelines, that we all currently appreciate and enjoy. The proposal also fails to meet the overarching objective and strategies of clause 15.01-5S of the planning scheme. This development does not respect the existing neighbourhood character, nor contribute to a preferred neighbourhood character or protect the sense of place. Again, site-specific context and immediate neighbourhood is really important here. Overwhelmingly, the residents of Precinct A do not support these type of developments, and there is a good reason for that. The DD03 preferred maximum building height for this precinct is 10 metres. The application is 10.915 metres. There isn't a building next door, nor in the same block, nor neighbouring block, that for that matter, that is 10 metres, let alone 10.915 metres. I cannot find any justification for allowing this type of development in this location. It does not reflect the community identity that is consistent within the built form in this part of the corridor. The design, scale, height and visual bulk of the development will be a significant change to the directly adjoining properties. There is also a highly sensitive residential interface at the rear, and I sympathise with residents that will be directly impacted if this is approved. It's a clear overdevelopment of the site and its surrounds. Along with other DD03 guidelines around appearance, amenity, streetscape presentation, setbacks and the precinct-specific guidelines and profiles, there is a good reason to refuse this application. Quoting straight from the guidelines, the character and feel of this corridor is significantly affected by the way buildings relate to each other as viewed from the street. I really hope my colleagues join me and the 72 objectors to support this refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Adams, for putting up this refusal. The sheer length of it, I think, outlines both the work that you've put into this particular refusal, but also the significant grounds as to why you're suggesting a refusal for this application, obviously why I've seconded that refusal. I do want to preface what I say with just a few points, and I guess they are things that have disappointed me throughout the process with this particular application. I acknowledge there is significant community angst in regards to a potential application, but this is planning is a statutory process that is undertaken by local government authorities and of which we're representatives. And I have full faith that due process has been followed in this regard. Many of the objectors probably listening tonight would be aware that an objectors meeting, a consultation meeting was held with Councillor Adams and myself, and we were nearly pushing 3 hours, and it gave plenty of time and have since given plenty of time to the objectors as well. I also want to note that there's been some fairly nasty commentary throughout the neighbourhood, particularly flyers dubbing these apartments as watch out COVID apartments coming, and some really quite foul commentary that hasn't done anyone any good, and has hyped up a lot of residents and a lot of fear, as has references to renters and tarring renters with a particular brush that they're not welcome in a neighbourhood. I myself am a renter in Essendon, and I can assure you as a council, we recognise that our city is made up of ratepayers, residents and a whole range of residents. With that out of the way, I just want to obviously support Councillor Adams's comments, particularly the references to how this application aligns with that Garden Suburban 3 profile in the neighbourhood character precinct profiles 2012. I disagree with the report on page 76, where it suggests the siting and massing of this development is consistent with the pattern of development that has occurred in the immediate and wider area. You'd struggle to find too many similar dwellings throughout along Buller Road, let alone that pocket of Strathmore, down Cranwell, and subsequent streets that it backs onto. Similarly, the non-compliance with the DDO3, they're significant in my eyes. The street setback, the building height, I know a DDO height is preferred, but it's over, as well as the waste and recycling and windows issues. So on those grounds, happy to support refusal, and I would urge my fellow councillors to do the same.
Thank you, Councillor Nation, right on time. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly happy to support a refusal for this application. I'd like to thank the residents for getting in touch and letting us know their concerns. My personal concerns are just the sheer bulk and scale of the proposal, being on that corner lot right in pretty much the residential heartland of Strathmore, which is completely low scale in that particular area. I do have real concerns about the impact that this proposal would have on the nearby residents, obviously, but also the precinct in that little pocket between Carnarvon Road, Buller Road and Woodland Street, and being so close down to well, it's not, certainly not in a commercial area. It's purely residential. So I think also parking issues will be potentially major in this area. Obviously, we have the service road on Buller Road, which accesses the houses on Buller Road. We all know, Buller Road is a main road, but with the service road, it provides that buffer to the residential streetscape. A dwelling of this size with this many occupants and this many units contained in it will, in my opinion, have just a detrimental effect on how the roads operate in that area as well, and how parking is. There's no way the parking won't be affected down there. And also, we've recently stated that in the past, cars often parked on both sides of the service road. We've made sure in the last couple of years, or made a ruling in the last couple of years, that cars can only park on one side, so that certainly has limited parking down that little stretch there. So certainly happy to support the refusal, as I said, and hopefully my fellow councillors can also see fit to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Did any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Adams, for your motion, and Councillor Nation for seconding. I think I won't be. I'll be supporting the refusal. I really have appreciated members of the community contacting myself and ourselves as a council over the last couple of weeks. I think we all have seen many email campaigns where people provide their feedback, and sometimes things are a bit more copy paste than they should be. But I've really appreciated all the local residents' earnest feedback, where they've actually put a lot of thought and time into their views on this application. I won't speak to the technical aspects of it, because I think the three ward councillors have really covered it off really well, but I'm absolutely supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Any other councillor? Councillor Adams, would you like to close? No? I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 10.3 on the agenda is 441 to 443 Keeler Road, Nidgery, brackets Lot 1 on PC 157192, close bracket, hyphen construction of a multi-storey mixed-use building and reduction in car parking requirements within a design and development overlay Schedule 7. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Verdio.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an additional point 1I to read: the darker colours of the framing elements on the north and south elevations to be replaced with a lighter shade.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio, and everything else is the same. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. The application seeks approval for a construction of a 5-storey building, which will contain a medical centre, associated consulting rooms, a pharmacy and office space. I think the design and the application represents a significant uplift to the urban design of the streetscape. The way that it's going to be laid out maintains the thoroughfare. So currently it is an arcade, so patrons are able to move from Keeler Road to the road behind through the existing arcade, but I understand that will still be maintained. You'll be able to walk through the waiting rooms and through the pharmacy. So it's not going to impact on pedestrian thoroughfare. I know there has been some concern raised about the waiver of parking, and on the face of it, it does look like there is a significant waiver of parking of 52 car spaces. Unfortunately, and you'll find this throughout all of Metropolitan Melbourne, there is going to be significant demand for car parking. And if you look towards MV 2040, we've recognised this in our overarching policies. I don't think it's a reason for us to reject proposals that are going to lead to improved urban design, but also improved activity in areas that I think we do really need to invest in. Businesses have really suffered over COVID, and I think it's up to us to ensure that we focus on good urban design, but we also focus on uses that are going to bring people to areas and support local restaurants and support local cafes. I think the use works well in that area. I think it will fit in well to have a medical centre there with consulting rooms, and office space definitely is something we need to be looking at, including more of within the city. More and more people are moving out of the CBD and wanting to move into the satellite, the fringes. So having office spaces, I think, is actually a really important thing that we need to focus on more as a city. For those, also the additional point it's in my opinion that I think that the having a lighter shade to the facade will be more in keeping with the character of K Road. I think the black might be a little bit too contrasting, so I'm keen. I'd like to see that be lightened up. Other than that, I hope my fellow councillors can support this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I know this site quite well, and at first glance, I looked at the proposal and was concerned about the height, because the height is over the structure plan in that area. But considering the proposal as a whole, and being in the location, which is pretty much right in the middle of the street there along Keilor Road, I'm happy to support it without any changes to that. I think it is going to be a huge shame that that little access way, that or arcade really, that walkway that currently exists will be going. I think that's certainly a well-used little arcade there, walk through to the Wallace Mall car park. If anybody is curious as to where I'm talking about, it's the location where Sticky Fingers Children's Boutique and the optometrist on the other side. There's a little walkway through. And I guess it was surprising for me to learn that arcade was on the title of this land, and as such, the proposal here, it's obviously legitimate to propose, well, it's somebody's land, so they can do whatever they like, and the proposal is to effectively get rid of that arcade style, point of, where people can walk through. But obviously, notwithstanding, there is a notation in the proposal that people will be able to walk through the pharmacy that's proposed for the ground floor, which you'll find, a couple of doors up at the pharmacy as well. Like a lot of the pharmacies there have entrances back and from the back and the front. So I'm not really sure that it's going to be used in the future as it is now. But like I said, it's on this arcade that currently exists is on someone's land, and the proposal before us is to develop that land. So I'm happy to support it as it is, notwithstanding I'm sure we will get inquiries as to the walkway when it effectively goes, when this proposal starts happening and starts construction. So yeah, it's just something to be mindful of, I guess. Happy to make the colours a little bit lighter. Keilor Road is certainly a strip of shops that I think we really need to focus on and look at the streetscape wise, and just the aesthetics of the whole strip. This is going to be different, but it is right in the centre, as I said. So happy to support this motion before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I won't be supporting this motion, and I'll foreshadow that I'll move a refusal motion if this is unsuccessful. So look, I think looking at the design of the application, as Councillor Sharp sort of touched on, that Keilor Road, this particular part of Keilor Road is in need of a revamp, and it has been for a long time. I do think the design is what we should be looking at in future and what will be in and around the area going forward into the next decade or further. I really can't get past the car parking limit. So under our planning scheme, 50 car parks are required under this application, and the application is offering 0. Now, I do understand that this is commercial land, but also when we're looking at a doctor's surgery, a pharmacy and commercial space, you would expect there to be people who drive in rather than catch the tram. I did look at essentially potentially amending this to condition a lower amount of car parks, but unfortunately that isn't really feasible under the statutory rules of planning and the like. But I do think with already such a huge shortage of car parks in the area, and having spoken to the traders extensively about this, I'm sure ward councillors would understand. And I know Councillor Bedio, I think, was at a meeting of traders less than a year ago, specifically talking about this issue. This will compound the issue and make it worse. So that's essentially the reason I won't be supporting it. As I said, though, I think the design is great. I know the applicant is an upstanding member of the community in the local area, but purely because of that reason, I won't be supporting it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I'm happy to support this motion, and I'm just a little bit disappointed with Councillor Tyson's comments there, because I think the reality is any potential development that's going to increase and contribute to the uplift of what we all recognise is an extremely tired strip of shops is going to require a waiver of car parking, and that's the sheer nature of these titles on Keilor Road, like this particular one, which is, you know, all of 400 square metres. And actually, if you try to increase, you try to introduce car parking within these sites, not only is it difficult to manage because of the laneway off the back, but you're obviously not going to have frontages to Keilor Road. It just surprises me that we're out there championing we need investment in Keilor Road. We want to spend money, and we've allocated money in the budget for some streetscape works, but we're suggesting an application that backs onto the largest at-grade council-owned parking lot in the entire city of Moonee Valley doesn't have a sufficient number of car parks nearby for people to use. It really strikes me as an odd argument, and unfortunately, if we do not encourage investment in Keilor Road, be it a medical centre, which is obviously in need, and a pharmacy, some office space as well, then we will continue to get that feedback from locals, from traders, from users of the area, that it's not a shopping strip they use. I walked down Keilor Road the other day to have a look at the site, and something that struck me as someone who doesn't shop there all that often is the number of vacancies. There's a huge number of vacancies. I've got a list here, and there's at least, and you can jump on realestate.com.au, there's about 22 of them. Hopefully, applications like this that supply a use to the area that is needed and warranted is definitely going to increase foot traffic, increase usability, and therefore hopefully contribute to the uplift that Councillor Bedio spoke to when moving this motion. So I am in full support of this recommendation and the planning officer's report, and I would urge my fellow councillors to have that overarching view of the precinct as a whole when considering this application and the benefit it may provide to the Keilor Road shopping strip.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to all the other councillors and their comments, which I agree with. With regard to the pedestrian walkthrough, although this will go, I just wanted to note that in the application there is a front and rear entrance that will create sort of a walkthrough, albeit through a retail and medical centre. So I just wanted to note that. I'm really excited to see this application come through for Keilor Road. The location of the site is part of the Nidri Keilor Road Major Activity Centre, which is very established, but also in parts tired and old, as Councillor Nation commented. And I really want to see this great shopping, and I think this development will really contribute to the aspirations Council has for Keilor Road. It's located within the principal public transport network and is directly opposite a tram line and in proximity to a number of bus services. So it really complements our strategic directions of NV 2040. There is also a car park, as Councillor Nation has mentioned, behind with approximately 315 spaces behind it with varying parking limits. So I'm comfortable that there is adequate parking in proximity to the application site. I also support the condition to use lighter colours for the facade. Having a lighter frontage will maintain the visually interesting built form to the streetscape due to the contemporary architectural design and form, and will complement the lighter colour scheme of its neighbouring multi-storey buildings. We want medical centres and essential services on Keilor Road, or they will end up in residential areas. And municipality is growing. The more services, essential services we can encourage in our major activity centres, the more foot traffic there will be, giving more life and economic benefits to the area. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Isa.
So it often comes as a surprise to tenants, and we've had a number of people I've had a number of people contact me in the last 6 months where they've moved into whether it's residential or an office space or a retail space, and they've got nowhere to park, and they come asking why they're not able to get a parking permit, why council doesn't give them a parking permit to park near to where they're trying to work or live. And we have to explain that council doesn't give permits, and there won't be any permits on street or off street parking permits for anyone working at this premises, for anyone trying to visit this premises. And people are quite surprised that developments are allowed to go, that council lets developments go through in such circumstances, and without the forethought as to what the tenant or the user of the building is going to do. And as much as I am pro sustainable transport and ride my bike as often and walk as often as I can, and pro electric vehicles, etc., I think we're being impractical, because a medical centre typically doesn't have people who feel comfortable or able to use trams, and that's the main public transport. The buses, I'm not as familiar with the bus routes, but public transport is not always accessible to people who are seeking medical attention, people with prams, young babies. So if it wasn't a medical, if I've asked if it wasn't a medical centre, would I feel differently about the waiver of car parking? Maybe, but I still think that we're inviting complaints. Now, it's also been put that there's a big 300 car park right behind. Yes, that's right, but that's to service a huge strip. And I think that the reliance of the developer on the car park is somewhat unfair, a little bit cheeky perhaps. The argument that that a development in itself is of such great benefit to Keilor Road that it ought waive other considerations, I think is a stretch. I understand the support for development, the support for renewal, but I think to then say, well, you don't need to provide any car parking for any doctors, anyone who's going to use the building, any patients, any disability parking, any loading bay, that we will provide all of that for you as a council, and we will cop all of the complaints and we will deal with all that. I think it's creating a problem for ourselves that we should anticipate at this point and at this time, and be smarter about how we make sure those problems aren't experienced by future tenants.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, I have you as the only councillor who hasn't spoken. Would you like to speak? No. Councillor Bedio, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, the reality is our high streets are dying. Like, we desperately need to intervene, and we need to be a council that supports new businesses investing in our high streets, that are going to provide the complementary uses that are therefore going to support these other businesses that are struggling and have struggled so much over the last 24 months. I understand that parking is an issue. Parking is always going to be an issue, and I think as our term progresses, we're going to find this comes up more and more often. But we can't, something like this that's going to provide local employment, that's going to provide additional activity, that's going to support other businesses, that's going to provide urban uplift. I don't think we can deny that on the basis of parking. You go anywhere in Melbourne, you know, my GP's in Paran. Finding a car park there is a pain. You know, if I didn't want to find a car park, I'd catch a train. You know, they're lucky enough that there's a tram line along K Road. Unfortunately, that's the reality of inner city Melbourne, and I think we're going to have to make some big changes moving forward. And MB 2040 really puts the emphasis on active transport, and the developers here have provided an exceedance of a number of bicycle parking in line with that. I really would hope that councils can support this. I think this is going to be a really big upgrade for K Road, and these are the sort of developments we need to be seen supporting to encourage development in our city. We want these uses in our city. We want people to invest in our city. So I hope my fellow councillors can support me on this.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Adams, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Tyson, Councillor Isa. That motion is carried. Item 10.4 on the agenda tonight is 166 The Boulevard, Aberfeldy, MV-19-2021. Construct 2 or more dwellings on a lot in the general residential zone and construct a building or construct or carry out works in the design and development overlay schedule 1. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative motion to refuse the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Can you please read it out?
I'd like to move that council issues a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV-19-2021 at 166 The Boulevard, Aberfeldy, Lot 11 on PS 015933 to construct 2 or more dwellings on a lot in the general residential zone and construct a building or construct or carry out works in the design and development overlay schedule 1 in accordance with the following grounds of refusal. 1, the bulk, scale, form and layout of the proposal fails to meet the objectives of strategies contained within clause 21.06 built environment and clause 43.02 design and development overlay schedule 1 of the Moonee Valley planning scheme, resulting in a development that does not appropriately respond to the opportunities and constraints of the site as well as the surrounding context. 2, the proposed vehicular gradients does not accord with design standard 3, gradients of clause 52.06 car parking of the Moonee Valley planning scheme. 3, the proposal fails to comply with the following provisions of clause 55 res code of the Moonee Valley planning scheme. A, clause 55.02-1 neighbourhood character. B, clause 55.03-3 site coverage. C, clause 55.03-8 landscaping. D, clause 55.04-1 side and rear setbacks. E, clause 55.04-6 overlooking. F, clause 55.05-2 dwelling entry. G, clause 55.05-5 solar access to open space. 4, the proposal represents an overdevelopment of the land. And 5, the proposal will cause adverse traffic impacts on the surrounding area, which will be substantial and unreasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Acknowledging that this application is similar to a previous application submitted in 2015 and was refused at a meeting of council. The application was subsequently reviewed at a hearing at VCAT and approved in 2018. The permit lapsed on the 29th of June 2020 as works did not commence, and now we have another submission for this site that is very similar to the previous application. The Boulevard in Aberfeldy really is a jewel in Moonee Valley. This address is located in a portion of the Maribyrnong River that is highly frequented by local residents and visitors from across Moonee Valley and beyond. This open space and landscape is home pedestrian paths, sporting facilities and other activities. The Boulevard's beautiful streetscape and landscape of this really important interface with the river is really appreciated by anyone who walks around the river regularly. I respectfully disagree with the officer's report and VCAT assessment that the development is considered appropriate
Councillor
and will not result in significant visual amenity of the surrounding.
Sorry, Councillor Adams, I just want to let you know your computer's just a bit glitchy at the moment. You can keep talking. I just want, no, that's okay. It's only ever cut you out for about a second or so at a time, but I just thought if it goes for any longer, I'll stop you and you can say your sentence again, but sorry.
Do you want me to repeat anything or do you
no,
got the gist?
I think we've got the gist, but I'll let you know if it's any longer. Thanks, Councillor Adams.
Thanks for letting me know, because I can't tell, and I'm on the cellular, so I'm not using my Wi-Fi or anything. I'll continue. I hope I get more time on the clock.
Yes,
this is an area we need to fiercely protect from overdevelopment and maintain its wonderful character. The report states that the development has been assessed against the decision guidelines of the Design and Development Overlay Schedule 1 and Maribyrnong River Valley Design Guidelines 2010. The Maribyrnong River Valley Design Guidelines 2010 outlines a vision for valley development that ensures river structures and new development is sympathetic to the river valley and protect and enhance the character of each river length. It also talks about the urban development interface that seeks to present the best visual aspect of the buildings to the river. In my opinion, development such as 166 the Boulevard and its neighbouring property at 168 the Boulevard go against these principles. Referring to DDO Schedule 1 Skyline area, the design objectives are to protect areas along the Maribyrnong River from visual intrusion caused by the inappropriate siting or appearance of buildings and works, to encourage development in keeping with the character and appearance of the area, to protect and enhance the skyline when viewed from the river or its banks. In my opinion, this is overdevelopment of the land. It is bulky and boxy and is imposing when viewed from the river corridor. I don't want the boulevard filled with a row of these type of apartment style developments. In 2017, a petition was tabled at a meeting of council where 456 people signed the petition concerning the proposed development of the 4-storey building at 166 the Boulevard and general overdevelopment of the Maribyrnong River area. I will note that this petition pertained to the previously submitted application, but because there are very little changes between the last submission and to the current submission of plans, it is absolutely worth noting the broad sentiment of concern for the overdevelopment of this area by both users of the Maribyrnong River and residents in the neighbourhood. At the consultation meeting on the 1st of December 2021, the objections were issues around neighbourhood character, the proposal detracts from the established character of the area, the scale of the proposal and the excessive crossover width, site layout and building massing, excessive height and boundary to boundary form and reduction of green space, overdevelopment being excessive built form and visual bulk, off-site amenity impacts due to the slope of the land. Adjoining properties at the rear of the development will have amenity impact specifically of outward views. Car parking and traffic, the proposal will cause adverse traffic impacts in the surrounding area due to lack of visitor parking and will lead to increased traffic within the area. The VCAT decision acknowledges that the sloping topography strongly influences the character of the neighbourhood and states that dwellings on the boulevard have been designed to take advantage of opportunities for views to and across the river corridor. I believe we also need to respect and acknowledge that the unique views and landscape are also enjoyed by properties to the rear of this site, and I can sympathise with the objectors who live behind the property that are located further up the slope that have had their views greatly compromised by the built apartment building at 168 the Boulevard. I do not wish to further create a massing of large roofs that along the bottom of the slope, as it really does impact the amenity of the properties behind. The design is bulky and boxy and, in my opinion, an imposing form when viewed from the river corridor. I just don't want the boulevard filled with a row of these type of developments, and so I hope my colleagues will support me and the numerous resident objectors that are opposing this development to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Adams. And you obviously got that extra 30 seconds, so apologies for interjecting in between there. Well, I wasn't exactly sure how your connection was going, but it actually was really good for that second half. No issues at all. Now, seconded was Councillor Sharp. Would you like to speak on the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly happy to concur with my fellow councillor and support this proposal for refusal. We had a proposal that is very, very similar that came to us back in 2017. And as Councillor Adams mentioned, we received a petition at that time, which I believe from memory I tabled as ward councillor. And it was very distressing for the residents involved back at that time in 2017 when this was first proposed. Obviously, we got 450 signatures, so it was a proposal that was certainly highlighted to a lot of people in the area, and I don't think the angst at all has dissipated. Well, I know it hasn't actually. We had a consultation meeting late last year. Everyone's just very concerned about how I suppose us as a council is going to look at the boulevard holistically with the Maribyrnong River and the Maribyrnong River planning controls, which specifically state that buildings are to not dominate the streetscape. And these type of large buildings that is proposed in this proposal in front of us, or application in front of us, it's big, it's large, it's bulky, and it is visually dominating. I don't think there's any getting around that. I note that back in 2017, the proposal went to VCAT. It was approved at VCAT. Unfortunately, it's come back to us again now with very little change. So all I can say is that from my own perspective, my view hasn't changed in regards to the impact that this proposal will have in this pristine area of our city. And we need to be very mindful about the controls that we have. And I actually think we probably, we're looking at the controls through the waterways of the west and things like that. So I'm hoping that we can improve to make what we want to see even more pronounced in the future, so that these guidelines that we have in front of us aren't sort of wishy-washy and subjective, which I think is the problem that we've got at the moment. Stronger controls are needed to make sure that we don't have these types of applications popping up along the entire length of the boulevard. That is absolutely certain. So certainly happy to support the refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I'm happy to support my fellow ward councillors in refusing this application. And look, it in reality might be just fourth time unlucky for this site, because as my fellow councillors have mentioned, it does have quite a significant history and a significant history of development being approved in some form. And then permits lapsing, and that dates right back to 2005. A three-storey dwelling was approved, but permits lapsed as works didn't commence. 2014, three dwellings comprising 3 stories, basement car parking, approved but lapsed on the 3rd of March. And then, as Councillor Sharp and Councillor Adams indicated, another application lodged in 2015, approved by VCAT in 2017, and lapsed in the middle of last year. I raise that because while acknowledging that applications have previously been approved on this site, we as a council, when there's a new application and this is considered a new application, need to assess it on merit, how it stacks up against our planning scheme, and then come to a decision. And in my opinion, that decision this time, based on a number of clauses that Councillor Adams cited in her refusal, is that this is not a suitable response to this site. I think with a site on a slope like this, there are always going to be some negative amenity impacts to the people that live on Clifton Street. I don't think you're ever going to get away with seeing the top of a roof, because that's the sheer nature of the slope of the block, and the blocks are back onto it. But this dwelling, or these dwellings, aren't just at the back of the block. They extend right through to the front, and at the front it's basically a 4-tier building. Because it extends to the front of the block, the site coverage is over the 60%, and it'd be rare of us, particularly in a GRZ, to consider an application that has a site coverage above 60%. It's 67, I think, from memory. That might not be spot on, but it is a considerable percentage over the preferred as part of our planning scheme. Councillor Adams has also cited the landscaping issues, the non-compliance with the side and rear setbacks, the overlooking dwelling entry, and the solar access. So I think there's sufficient grounds to knock this back, on top of those points raised by Councillor Adams and Councillor Sharp relating to its context and the Maribyrnong River that is right there on its doorstep. So look, as I said, potentially fourth time unlucky for this site, but on an assessment on this new application, I just can't support anything but a refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Isa.
I'm really very unsure about this, and I did say to Councillor Adams that I was unsure about this application, and she did say that she would do her best to convince me. And I've got to say, both on this application and the previous one, Councillor Adams has put in an enormous amount of work to go through all of the very complex planning scheme provisions, and it's that's what we have to decide matters on, is how an application, as Councillor Nation said, how an application before us shapes up against those particular planning considerations. And it has, it's a lot of work for councillors to go through all of those planning concerns and go through the plans and match up how we appraise this against some very significant design objectives, in this case, which are the Maribyrnong River related design objectives. And the Maribyrnong River is a really, really significant environmental element of Moonee Valley and of Maribyrnong. And I think that the tension for me on this one is that we have an application that was approved in effect in 2018, I think it was. I might have that date wrong, and it hasn't substantially changed. But in reading the decision, and I've just been having another look at the VCAT decision, it really is a decision that says, well, here are the design objectives that need to be met, but in the context of a transitional environment where lots of people have perhaps not been consistent with those design objectives, and there's now some buildings that perhaps don't meet those design objectives, I'll let this development not meet those design objectives too. And that sort of seems to be the logic behind the decision. And I guess I probably am falling on the side of saying, well, no, to me as a councillor, the design objectives that protect areas along the Maribyrnong River from visual intrusion and inappropriate appearance of building, and to protect and enhance and the skyline from the river, to encourage development that's consistent, all of that is very significant. So I think I'm probably persuaded that it is worth giving this another shot and letting VCAT know that we actually value our design guidelines. And although there might be developments that are inconsistent with it, we still want development along the Boulevard and along the Maribyrnong River that is consistent with our planning guidelines.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mouse cursor. Look, like Councillor Reiser, I found this one a really difficult decision to weigh up, and it's been really helpful. I thank councillors for speaking to the motion. It's been helpful to help me reach a decision. I think, you know, not being part of the previous council, I do respect, though, that this application almost identically came in 2017, I believe it was, or 15, I've heard in debate as well, and was refused unanimously. And I think, you know, the only new piece of information that we have as a council in considering this application, really, because it is, as has been said, almost identical, with one minor adjustment to the rear courtyard, I believe, is the tribunal's decision. And as Councillor Reiser's indicated, it speaks about that the boulevard being a transitional space, but I do believe that there are modern developments along the boulevard which don't present as imposing a facade. And this development, you know, I can see why the previous council rejected it unanimously, because it does, whilst obviously, you know, it would be lovely to own a riverfronted property with great views of the city, I'm not sure that as a councillor I want to approve a development that values those residents' aesthetics over the aesthetics of the neighbourhood as a whole. So, yeah, I too am leaning to support this refusal. And thank you, councillors, for putting the work on it.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor? No. Councillor Adams, would you like to close? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.5 on the agenda is the proposed sale of land from former road abutting rear of 141 Cooper Street, Essendon. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. And a seconder? Councillor Adams. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak on the motion?
It's got me worried now. I didn't think this was too controversial. Look, Mayor, one of the things that we often get from time to time in our city, just to the sheer nature of the age of a lot of our streets and a lot of our properties, are instances where the previously drawn up titles, which can date back decades and decades, don't quite line up with the actual property boundaries. That's the case with this particular property in Cooper Street, 141. There's a parcel of land at the rear of their property measuring approximately 13.4 metres, so the width of their block, by 1.3 metres. And that is fully enclosed within their property, bordering onto the neighbours. It's been enclosed within their property for a considerable period of time, but technically on the title, that land has not been transferred back in the day from the relevant city, which would have been the city of Essendon, through to the property owner. So last year we received a report to kickstart this process, which would see that that land returned to the property owner and the titles correctly fixed. That process needs to follow what is outlined in the brief report, and that process was followed. Submissions were called for. There was one submission received in favour of the proposal, and I think that obviously outlines that this is not a neighbour dispute where there's a fence line and someone's trying to claim land. Everyone acknowledges it's within this property, and they just want those title lines fixed. Obviously, council gets compensated. We're required to. We can't give land away for free. and the valuer has come up with a figure which is within the report that will be transferred to council. So pretty self-explanatory. As I said, in my time on council, we probably get 3 or so of these a year, particularly in the older suburbs and in the south of the municipality. And it's a fairly straightforward procedure. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Adams.
Thanks. I think Councillor Nation spoke really well on this item. I've got nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak on this one? Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams sort of spoke. You don't want to close? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Councillors, item 10.6 on the agenda tonight is titled Local Sports Infrastructure Fund 2021-22 Hanson Reserve Application. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I will need you to bear with me on this one as I will need to add a few points. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with some additional points.
Yes.
I'm just thinking whether I should call for a quick adjournment, if that's okay, just so that I can prepare.
Well.
Look, actually, no, it's fine. I should be able to work it out. Sorry, so I'll add an additional point. Actually, yeah, I'll need to call for a quick adjournment if possible.
Okay, so you'd like to move for an adjournment. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Tyson, all those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Adams, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Isaac is carried. Will adjourn. At home, I anticipate we'll be back in 8 minutes. Thank you, at 8:30.
Don't think I'm getting to the soccer. Oops.
Did you? I'm not sure whether we're still live on YouTube. If we can get, I've got on my screen that it still is. So we'll just.
Still live, please hold.
Okay, thank you everyone for your patience there. Obviously, being via Zoom, sometimes things can get a little bit clunky, so I do apologise for that. Now, councillors, I believe I have to take a vote to, as we're in adjournment. So I will, no, I've got a shake from the previous Deputy Mayor. So we can just restart. Apologies. Now, Councillor Betty, are you going to move something?
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council resolves to A, apply for $59,000 through Sport and Recreation Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Community Sports Lighting Stream for the Hanson Reserve Floodlights Upgrade Project. B, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Hanson Reserve Floodlights Upgrade Project and refer the project to the 2022-2023 budget process. C, note officers will prepare other applications for the Local Sports Infrastructure Fund that are in line with Council's budget and long-term capital works plan and meet the mandatory requirements for submission. D, direct the CEO to apply only for grants and funding opportunities which align with identified priorities endorsed by Council through resolution, its advocacy strategy 2022 to 2025, the Council Plan 2021 to 2025, or the Council budget and long-term capital works plan. E, apply for $250,000 through Sport and Recreation Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Community Facilities Stream for the Fanny Street Reserve BMX project. I believe I'm up to letter F. F, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Fanny Street Reserve BMX project and refer the project to the 2022-2023 budget process. G, apply for $75,000 through Sport and Recreation Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Community Sports Lighting Stream for the Walter Street Reserve Lighting Project. H, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Walter Street Reserve Lighting Project and refer the project to the 2022-2023 budget process. H, apply through Sport and Recreation Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Female Friendly Facility Stream for the Overland Reserve Netball Court project. I, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Overland Reserve Netball Court project and refer the project to the 2022-2023 budget process. J, apply through the Sport and Recreation Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Female Friendly Facility Stream for the Avondale Heights Tennis/Netball Courts Resurfacing project. K, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Avondale Heights Tennis/Netball Courts Resurfacing project and refer the project to the 2022-2023 budget process. L, request the CEO prepare a report to Council by June 2022 on the findings of the Sporting Field Lighting Audit Report with a view to assessing the findings against operational considerations, including intensity of use, suitability of playing surfaces, and anticipated future demand. The report should identify any priority projects for further preparatory work in 2021/2022 in order to be shovel ready should future grant opportunities arise.
That's all, Councillor Bedio. Now, I'm just so we make sure we've got everyone's on the same page, I've just asked for governance just to pop exactly what Councillor Bedio has said, what the motion is in front of us in the chat as well, the online room. So apologies for people zooming in from home. I think Councillor Bedio, so this is what governance believes to be governance. If you believe that there was one point here that wasn't read out, can you please just highlight which point wasn't read out? Councillors, can you? Right. Councillor Bedio.
Yeah, let me just double check. Sorry, it was just a long.
It's in the chat, Councillor Bedio. Can you?
Yeah.
So I need to make sure as chair that everyone knows we are voting on. And I must admit that even myself, I don't even know 100%. So, Councillor Video, just so we're on the same page, in the chat, we'll go with, is your intention that A, apply for $59,000 through Sport and Rec Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Community Sports Lighting Stream for the Hanson Reserve Floodlights Upgrade Project, was that correct? B, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Hanson Reserve Floodlights Upgrade Project and refer the project to the 2022-23 budget process. That's correct. Yes. C, note officers will prepare other applications for local sports infrastructure funds that are in line with Council's budget and long-term capital works plan and meet the mandatory requirements for submission. That's correct. Yep. D, direct the CEO to apply only for grants and funding opportunities which align with identical priorities endorsed by Council through resolution. Its advocacy strategy 2022 to 25, the Council Plan 2021 to 25, or the Council Budget and Long-Term Capital Works Plan. That's D. Is that correct? E is apply for $250,000 through Sport and Rec Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Facility Stream for the Fanny Street Reserve BMX project. Is that correct? F is endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Fanny. Did we just do that one? Sorry, F. Oh yeah, F is endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Fanny Street project. Is that right? I've got Fanny Street. Yep. So sorry, just to get the words, Councillor Video, exactly what did you want for F? If you can say it.
F is endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Fanny Street Reserve BMX project and refer the project to the 2022-2023 budget process. That's F.
All right, thank you. G, I've got apply for $75,000. So I'm up to G, apply for $75,000 through Sport and Rec Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Community Sports Lighting Stream for the Walter Street Reserve Lighting Project. Is that correct? H, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Walter Street Reserve Lighting Project and refer the project to the 2022-23 budget process. Is that right? Yeah. I, apply through Sport and Rec Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Female Friendly Facility Stream for the Overland Reserve Netball Court Project. Is that correct? Yep. J, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Overland Reserve Netball Court Project and refer the project to the 2022-23 budget process. Is that correct? K, apply through Sport and Rec Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Female Friendly Facility Stream for the Avondale Heights Tennis/Netball Courts Resurfacing Project. Is that correct? L, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Avondale Heights Tennis Netball Courts Resurfacing Project and refer the project to the 2022-23 budget process. Is that correct? Yep. And M, request the CEO to prepare a report to Council by June 2022. Sorry, my screen's cut off there. I know there was, if you can just read that, hold on, I've got it now. So, request the CEO to, apologies, this Zoom, where did I get up to? M, request the CEO to prepare a report to Council by June 2022 on the findings of the sport field lighting audit report with a view to assessing the findings against operational considerations, including intensity of use, suitability of playing surfaces and anticipated future demand. The report should identify any priority projects in further preparatory work in 2021-2022 in order to be shovel ready should future grant opportunities arise. Okay, we got there eventually. Now, councillors, it's all obviously on the side of your screen. Can I just get a general nod that people have the correct motion in front of them, and if there's any clarification on anything? Now, councillors, as this is obviously there's lots of bits to this. Following the end of the vote, I will separate it to vote on it in particular sections, fairly separate. Okay, so Councillor Bedio, so moved. Do I have a seconder for this motion? So if we don't have a Councillor Tyson. Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. And sorry, councillors and everyone at home for that long deliberation in preparing this. I guess I live by the saying, shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. We have a significant opportunity to apply for funding from Sports and Recreation Victoria under their local sports infrastructure fund. Under that, there's many different streams available for different types of infrastructure that you can apply for. Obviously, a municipality like ours, we really value and love our sporting community, and there is a lot of identified needs for lighting, things such as lighting audits, upgrades that we've identified through master plans and the like. I really, and the kind of, I guess it's my perspective that if there's money potentially available, we should be applying for as much as we can. Even if we don't get it, you know, I think it's worth trying. We might get some, we might not get some. I acknowledge that, you know, certain projects here aren't in my ward, and I do acknowledge that, Mayor, you may opt to break this up and have a discussion, but I thought it's reasonable that we put everything on the table and that we discuss collaboratively as a council group about what we want to apply for. And with that, I'd love to see us be able to deliver on all of these projects. That might not be possible. We might not be eligible for all of this funding. But I thought,
sorry, Councillor Bedio, sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm just mindful the time is not on my screen. If governance can just click that. Sorry, please continue.
That's fine. I'll finish up there. If my perspective, if we can apply for as many grants as possible, these are all things we've identified as infrastructure we wanted to proceed with. And, you know, I'd be happy to break this up for debate on individual items.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bedio, for preparing this very extensive motion, which I don't think I've seen to point M before in the alphabet in a motion before. I echo what you said. I think this is a good cross-section across all of our different areas that we represent, different organisations, good cross-section of different projects. This does reach the maximum limit of what we can apply for under these different grant streams, and I think we should aim for this. As the motion says, a lot of this is subject to our budgeting process, which we're going through over the next few months, but I'm keen to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Would any other, Councillor Hodgson?
Thanks, Mayor. Could I just move a small amendment, please?
Sure.
Just to point M, to amend the wording by remove June and add so that it reads, request the CEO to prepare a report to council as soon as possible, but no later than May 2022. So that would be the sentence. Apologies, I'll say that again. Request the CEO to prepare a report to council as soon as possible, but no later than May 2022. So it's removing the words by June.
Yep, I think that's fairly clear. Thank you. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Tyson, you can't second it. Councillor Isa. Thank you. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just limit my comments to this amendment. The intention of preparing some words like this, and I did speak to officers on this, this paragraph. The intention of it is to try and, as the second part of the paragraph indicates, identify any priority projects for preparatory work in the 2021-22 financial year. And it's really quite important that in order to make an informed decision on what might be a priority project with some of those operational considerations, that we get that information as soon as possible, but no later than May, in order to be able to implement. That would hopefully give us the 6 to 8 weeks to be able to do that preparatory work within this financial year. So I just wanted to make that slight amendment to request that officers, pull out all the stops and try and get this as soon as possible, but indicate that, the May date is really the date by which we need it in order to meet the intention of this paragraph.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa.
Yeah, thanks. Just speaking to this specific amendment, and I'd made the same notes myself, Councillor Hodgson, so I'm glad that you've moved that, because it is all about having the timing in order to apply for grants. Council needs to have the designs ready on particular projects, and we need to line up our report on the audit report to give us enough time to then do some preparatory work and be ready for any grants. Just with the sporting field lighting audit report, it's no surprise to anyone who's been working on who's been playing on sporting fields that lighting audit has been going on and has been some essential work, and it's essential work to inform decisions such as these, but I'll speak a little bit more to that in the substantive debate. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would anybody else like to speak on this amendment? Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close? No, I'll just put this amendment to the vote. All those in favour? And that amendment is carried. Thank you. Now, Councillor, I've got Councillor Bedio has spoken, Councillor Tyson has spoken, Councillor Hodgson, you haven't spoken yet. Would you like to speak? The motion.
Mayor, I wouldn't like to give up my right, but not at this time, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Or do I need to speak now if I... Okay.
No, I don't believe so, because you just moved the amendment off the bat. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, won't speak at this moment. I'd just like to ask a point of clarification, if I may.
Certainly.
So I'm asking, and I'm just mindful of our new rules. So I'll just try and make sure that I comply with the rules.
No one was speaking at the time, so I believe that that's okay. That's my interpretation.
That's right, but I'm just making sure I ask a question that can be answered, and if I don't, hope you'll let me paraphrase it so I can. I'd like to ask, through you, Mayor, the relevant director or the CEO, whether the projects flagged in E, F, G, H, I and J are eligible in their current status for these grants.
I'm not sure how that would be. Did you want to ask individually? Look, I'm happy to have the CEO give a general type comment. Is that what you're after, Councillor Isa?
If you need me to break it down, I'm happy to ask 3 separate questions.
I'll ask I'll ask the CEO, and I'll see if how she prefers to answer it. CEO, are you there? I can't see you on my screen. Thank you, CEO. Councillor Isa, if you can ask your question again, please.
Maybe if you permit me to ask 3.
Point of clarification. If you want to do it in 3, it's up to you.
It might be, if that's easier for people. I just wanted to save time. If I could just ask whether the Walter Street lights, which the project flagged in or mentioned in E and F, is eligible for the relevant grant.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. CEO?
Through the Mayor, I'll just read. Officers have provided advices to all councillors earlier today as further information. The Water Street Reserve lighting project does not meet the grant criteria of having detailed design, costings, or recent community engagement completed. In order to submit application to the local sports infrastructure fund, community sports lighting stream, we are required to upload information in response to each of these criteria. An application with incomplete documentation would not be considered by Sport and Recreation Victoria. That was the officer's advice. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Isa, is that okay for your point of clarification, or you had another point of clarification?
I've got two further points of clarification, Mayor. The second one is could, through you, would the CEO be able to please respond to a query about whether the Overland Reserve Netball Court project mentioned in G and H is eligible for the relevant grant?
Thank you, CEO.
Again, I would just read what officers provided to councillors earlier today as further information. This project does not meet the grant criteria of having detailed design, costings, or recent community engagement completed. In order to submit application to the local sports and infrastructure fund female-friendly facilities stream, we are required to upload the document in response to each of these criteria. An application with incomplete documentation would not be considered by SRV. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Isa, did you have anything else?
My third question, thank you, Mayor, the same question related to the Avondale Heights Tennis Netball Courts Resurfacing project mentioned in I and J of the motion, and whether that project is eligible for the relevant grant.
Susan, ma'am, sorry, Councillor Isa, can you please repeat which project?
My apologies, my voice is just going. It's Avondale Heights Tennis Netball Courts Resurfacing project mentioned in I and J of the motion.
Again, I will read the officer's advice provided to all councillors earlier today. This project does not meet the grant criteria of having detailed design, costings, or recent community engagement completed. In order to submit application to the local sports and infrastructure fund female-friendly facilities stream, we are required to upload documentation in response to each of these criteria. An application with incomplete documentation would not be considered by SRV. Officers also recommend that in the case of leased facilities, the lessee seek appropriate funding opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Isa, was
Mayor.
that? Sorry, Councillor Bedio, one second. Councillor Isa, did that answer your point of clarification?
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep. Councillor Bedio?
Can I just ask a point of clarification, please, Mayor? I'm not sure if, through you to the CEO.
Yep.
Point of clarification, I think it's relevant because it's to do with grant applications. Noting the pocket parks on Mount Alexander Road and Strathayr that we were successful for grant funding. I'm just wondering if we, at the time of applying, were those applications eligible under the grant criteria?
Mayor, can I make a point of order, please?
Yes. What is your point of order?
Well, it's actually just points of clarification need to be relevant to the report at hand. It's under clause 44.
I know we've got our new points of order. So, sorry, I'm just pulling it up, like you probably are too. What was your point of order? Apologies.
Yeah, my apologies. I'm just going to have to find it as well. I think it's clause 44, but I just don't have the wording in front of me.
Clause 40.3 is where a councillor is determined by the chair to be intentionally.
Oh, no, 44. Sorry, 44.2. A point of clarification should be limited to the facts and should not seek opinions of officers beyond what is expressed in the report.
We'll just take a moment to consider that. Apologies, everyone. I'm just making sure I've got to double check everything with the new governance rules. And I'm mindful that I can adjourn to consider this point of order, but I won't be too long in deciding. Councillor Isaac, can you please just repeat so I've got the exact wording of your point of order, please?
So I'm just raising that under clause 44.2, a point of clarification should be limited to facts and should not seek opinions of officers beyond what is expressed in a report.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Isaac, under 59.2, I'll rule against the point of order on the basis that we are talking about grants, but in saying that I'm mindful that the CEO may say that, because it is factual information, I'm mindful that the CEO may say that they don't have the information.
Mayor, can I just clarify that I was reading from the right rules? Sorry, have you got the most recent rules in front of you? I just wanted to make sure.
I do.
Was I reading the right section?
I believe I was looking at the point of order things. I think.
Yeah, no, I was. Sorry, I apologise. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. That's my reasoning behind it. I believe.
Sorry, Mayor, do you mind just repeating your reasoning? I'm so sorry, I was distracted by my own.
Sorry. Sorry, it's just disappeared off my screen. So I'm for the fact that we are talking about grants and it is factual information, I won't accept the point of order, but I'll make note that the CEO may not know the answer, but I do believe there is relevance to this report as it's to do with grants. Thank you, Councillor Isa, and thank you for being the first person to raise a point of order, and we can work through this. Councillor Bedio, can you please continue? Your point of order was asking, sorry, can you please, after all of that?
Sorry, yep, my point of clarification was, given that we're applying for grants and the discussion potentially of what is eligible and whether we should be applying for grants that might be perceived as being ineligible, I just wanted to raise the pocket parks that we were successful in receiving grants for, the pocket park we've had at Mount Alexander Road and Strathayed Pocket Park. Given we were eligible for that funding, were those projects eligible for the funding at the time of application?
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor CEO, I will direct this towards you because I'm mindful you may know the answer, but I do believe it's relevant because it's to do with grants, but I'm not sure whether you will have the answer.
Through the Mayor, I do not have the information in front of me. That was prior to my time. However, I do know that grant was through a different department, DELP, not SRV. Thank you. We can take the on notice and provide information to councillors later about what was the funding criteria when we applied. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, it would be not great if my computer ran out of charge. Okay, so now Councillor Isa, before your points of clarification, were you speaking on the motion? About to speak on the motion? I believe that's where we were at.
I wasn't, but if no one else wishes to speak on the motion at this time, I can. So perhaps if you want to just call for anyone else.
Yep, okay, so I think we're calling it as we're square at the moment. So we've had Councillor Bedio and Councillor Tyson have spoken to the motion. Nobody else has actually spoken to the motion yet. So would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa.
I'm happy for Councillor Sharp to go first.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand the eagerness to apply for as many grants as we can. Fully understand that. I would certainly hope that we're in a position to apply for lots of grants over the next, particularly the next 12 months, but certainly in the next 2 or 3 years, because we've got a lot to do in this municipality and we are unable to do it all of ourselves. So we do need financial backing, whatever department, state or federal that comes from. I do have just a couple of queries and I guess concerns about some of the items that have been put up tonight, and I'll just quickly run through them. Obviously, Fanny Reserve BMX project, that has the support of officers because the work's pretty much been done, so there's no problem with that. Walter Street Reserve lighting, there is a note here that we haven't done the background information on that, but we do have a cost associated with it, so at least that is something. With the netball courts at Overland Reserve, there's no cost associated with this in this recommendation, so I don't know personally how much grant we're applying for and how much we're potentially committed to the 2021-22 budget. So could I ask some clarification, please, around the funding required for the netball court, and can the time be stopped? Otherwise, I'll need more
Points of
time.
clarification can't actually be asked during a speech anymore, Councillor Sharp.
Not anymore. All right, I'll do it after.
Yeah.
So I will ask a point of clarification just on the costings at Overland Reserve. And the tennis court netball surfacing at Avondale Heights, there's no costing attributed to that either. We don't have money trees at council, and we were really recently quoted in the Age as, you know, being in dire trouble in 2 years' time. So I think as councillors, we really need to be financially aware of what we're doing here. And Mayor, I'll ask for an extension of time, please, for at least a minute. We need to be extremely careful about what we're committing to. And I don't have the knowledge in front of me about what exactly I'm committing to with this recommendation, not in its entirety anyway. Yeah, we've got upcoming budget discussions, and I'm really concerned about committing all these funds that effectively we don't even know what it's amounting to. Now, I've lost track about what I was going to ask. One of our main concerns around the tennis courts at Avondale Heights is that tennis courts have leases, and under the lease, clubs are expected to pay for maintenance and capital costs. Now, we all know around the table that a tennis club with 200-300 members doesn't have the financial capacity to be able to put massive amounts of money to do repairs and capital works and even potentially maintenance. We need to help our tennis clubs. We need to help the clubs that have leases that can't afford things. I don't have a problem with that, but we need to do it properly. And if we start going for grants through SRV that don't have the backing because you haven't done any background information, but if you start going to grants for SRV for a situation where the club is supposed to be paying for it, it's going to set a very, very bad precedent. It happened a number of years ago. I don't want to go back to what we did a number of years ago. A number of years ago, we didn't have great information. Now we have all the information, and I don't want to be making incorrect decisions because I have the information in front of me. And the fact is, if we want to support our clubs that have leases, we need to change the leases, and we need to do better in that aspect. No good chasing our tail and not sorting out the fundamental aspects of a lease while going for grants, putting in all these capital works, because if we do it for one club, we're going to do it for another, and that applies to all different codes, whoever has a lease. We just need to be really careful. And yeah, I just don't want to go back to the situation that we had in the past. So I'm very concerned about where this is all going. At the end of the day, this was a grant application for lights that are extremely needed at Airport West, at Edsel Reserve, Hanson Edsel Reserve.
Councillor Sharp, I've given you an extra minute and I do want to be fair, so I'll give you an extra 15 seconds if you'd like to finish your sentence.
At the end of the day, this motion was about lights, all done with a grant application that is all done, signed, sealed and delivered, perfect application for SRV. It's become this monolith with not adequate information, no information in some respects, and I'm really concerned about how we get to this point as a group sometimes. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Reiser.
Oh, did Councillor Hodgson want to go next? I think she had
apologies, sorry, I just went back to you because of what happened before. But look, I'll just again start it. I've got Councillor Bedio, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sharp speak. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Reiser. And look, thank you, Councillor Bedio, for moving this motion in particular. As Councillor Sharp mentioned towards the end of speaking there, the points that came from the officer's recommendation, it is a really important project that the officers have come to us seeking our support to put in an application for the Hanson Reserve floodlights. I know that we've heard a lot about the opportunity there and the opportunity it offers to grow sport at that reserve and improve the conditions for the clubs that use that reserve. So I think that's a really fantastic part. And thank you, Councillor Bedio, for including my point M, which noting the officer's advice that came through to us this afternoon, I did, and picking up on some of the concerns that Councillor Sharp had, I did want to make sure that, you know, when this opportunity is next presented to us, if the grant streams open up again, we do have that information that will sit behind some of the important projects that we know need to happen in our municipality, and that we can maximise the opportunity of getting those partner funds through the state government. I did have, you know, not only Walter Street, but also Ormond Park in mind when I went to officers to ask for these, a report to come on the lighting audit report. Those are two grounds that they have a lot of difficulty with, even just training under lights, and it causes a lot of problems for winter sport in particular, who don't have the late sunlight hours. But I did want to note that at Walter Street, there is also a working group that is discussing some telco towers and location of those. And I think in terms of the officer's advice that came to us around community consultation for each of these projects, and that Councillor Reiser asked points of clarification on, Walter Street being one, it is possible that we might need to spend a little bit more time on this one, just working through some of those issues and the opportunities of potentially combining a solution to the lighting problem and the telco problem that is happening down at Walter Street Reserve. So I'm a bit concerned about rushing an application for that project without considering implications for that other working group as well. And then I share some of Councillor Sharp's concerns about those other projects that have been nominated as well, just in terms of, you know, implications both for community engagement, but what it means for the lessees, and also what it means for our budget bottom line. So, Mayor, just in finishing, I do hope that we can vote on these in parts.
Yes, Councillor Hodgson, I've committed to doing that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Now, would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sharp, you've already spoken.
Yeah. Can I just ask a point of clarification, please, Mayor?
Sure.
Just 2 points of clarification. Could an officer please advise how much the netball court at Overland Reserve is flagged to be applied for, because there's no amount in this recommendation?
Yeah, Councillor Sharp, I'm happy to see you if you are available. CEO, do you have an answer to that question?
Through the Mayor, I don't have any information on costing because officers have not done the work yet. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Sharp, did you have another point of clarification?
Yes, please. Just very similar, well, exactly the same, except relating to the tennis court at Avondale Heights. Can I be advised if there's a dollar figure for that application for that proposal, please?
Thanks. CEO?
Thank you, Susan Mayor. Likewise, I do not have any information as officers have not done any work on costing. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Sharp. Were they all of your points of clarification? Yep. Okay, so we've had Councillor Bedio, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Reiser.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd also just, I know we're going to put this in parts, but just, I guess, to keep options open and keep things, I'd just like to foreshadow an alternative motion if, should this fail, so that we've got option to go back to an alternative if need be. Yeah, look, I always, you know, push the rules where I can, and happy to push back on advice where I vehemently disagree and annoy lots of people in the process. So I get that. I get wanting to push for things where maybe the parental advice is not to. But I think in this case, we have clear advice about the eligibility of some grants for some really competitive, some projects for some really competitive grants. And what's actually at stake here is our credibility as a grant applicant. And we've spent so much work on our advocacy platform, on our advocacy documents. We've tried to really position ourselves as credible advocates for our community, so that when we put forward a project and a request of our MPs, they know that we've done the work, we've consulted with people, we're not giving them a political hot potato, that we can be trusted to ask for money for projects that we're fully prepared to deliver. And I think, you know, mention was made of Strathayed. That I don't know whether it was eligible, and I wasn't on council either, but I do know that there had been a 4-year campaign by the community for that land, that the community consultation on that and the ask was really clear. So I'm not sure it's comparable. I won't go into it, but I've got some concerns about the way this process has been undertaken. Happy to talk about that more privately, but we've got clear advice before us. We need to be really responsible, put forward credible options. Our officers have worked really hard. They've given us information on which to make an informed and collective decision. We've got very competitive projects. There are a number of lighting projects that we would like to apply for, but I'm holding back from putting up some projects that I'd like to see because we haven't done the work. We can't ask for funding for Ormond Lights. If I could just have 30 extra seconds, Mayor.
Everyone can have an extra minute, to be fair.
I'd love to put forward Ormond Park lighting project. We know from we know that the lighting at Ormond is inadequate, but we haven't done the work. We can't put that forward in this grant round. It would be irresponsible of me to try to move a motion to do that. But we haven't done the work for some of the projects that are included in this motion. And I just want to maintain our credibility as an applicant, particularly in this election year. I want to get ready so that if there's another grant round in June, we are absolutely ready with some projects that we want to see. But I won't be supporting anything tonight that is not eligible for this granting stream through the very, very strict and competitive department, the Sports and Rec department. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Reiser. Any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I myself have not had conversations with other councillors. So a lot of these projects I'm looking at for the first time. I probably don't share Councillor Isaa's view that some sort of underhanded process has been followed. It's a motion, we're debating it, and we'll hopefully come to some sort of outcome.
Excuse me, Mayor, can I just raise a point of order?
Yes, if you can confirm what your point of order is.
Just under clause 81.1, the reference that I had said that there was some kind of underhand process, I'd just like to ask that to be withdrawn. I think it reflects badly on me that I might have suggested that. I didn't say that, I just said I had some concerns. I didn't say that there was anything underhanded.
I'm happy to withdraw it. I'm happy to withdraw it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nation.
I guess so I'll say that I don't share the concerns that obviously were circulated via email. So for me, the issue with this grant stream is that there's $27 million as part of the LSIF. $27 million that once spread out across not only 78 municipal councils, but also Alpine resort boards who are eligible, it's going to be a fairly competitive, but also probably a grant round where maybe councils are lucky to get one or two projects, particularly when you look at the criteria and when it talks about what is a priority, an investment priority under the LSIF. There's not a lot that ticks the boxes for us. It talks about supporting communities in areas that have experienced national disasters, support for multi-use shared and integrated facilities on school land, those that demonstrate economic uplift. They're the 3 of the 5 dot points under 1.4 investment priorities. So I think we're probably getting a little bit too excited in terms of what we might be able to achieve out of this round. And therefore, my personal view would be we probably need to just pick the 1 or 2 things that we really want to get done, because it's only $27 million. I don't think we're going to get 5 projects ticked off. And I would prefer to see our one major project that we really want to see granted in this round to be successful, as opposed to maybe a 5th-rate project out of 5 or 6 that we weren't really supportive of. So my personal opinion would be to really look at those 1 or 2 items, or 1 or 2 projects that I think are really valuable and needed. And so I'm grateful that the motion will be split. I do, however, just sort of want to note that I appreciate the officer's advice, but I also have been around council long enough to understand that advice is advice, but when you go into the detail, that potentially advice might not always be the correct advice. And I'll say that, and I do get an extra minute, don't I? Yeah. And so the advice from officers that we've received is that some of those projects raised within the motion don't have costings and we can't submit it. But actually, if you go into the really detailed guidelines of the LSIF, it talks about what requires costings, and there's certain thresholds. And one of those thresholds, which many of these projects would apply to, just requires an internal costing or a quote. It doesn't require it to go to market or for you to get external quotes. I've got the specific part of the guidelines here relating to costings. If total project cost is under $1 million, excluding GST, internal cost estimates suffice. So again, the advice from officers, I guess, is somewhat nuanced in terms of what sort of outcome they potentially support. I could talk about detailed design as well, because the specifics in regards to the lighting aren't actually in regards to detailed design. They're just in regards to lux charts. And so anyhow, I've got 3 seconds left, but I just want to say that advice isn't always what it is when you go delving into the specifics of this particular grant stream. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Now, I believe Councillor Adams, you're the only councillor who hasn't spoken. Sorry, you didn't want to speak? No? Councillor Isa?
Sorry, Mayor, if I could just ask a point of clarification about the comments Councillor Nation just made. I guess just seeking a comment from the CEO about whether that is reflected in the advice given to us.
Is it sorry, so what's your question, Councillor Isa?
Well, the advice given to us in the report is that these are the only projects that are eligible, and Councillor Nation's presented some alternative information. So I guess I'm seeking clarification through you to the CEO that the information Councillor Nation has given us has been taken into consideration in the officer's appraisal.
CEO, are you there?
Thank you, Susan Mayor. I don't have any further comment to add. All advice is already provided to all councillors through the report and through the additional information. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Bedio, would you like to close?
I'm just a little, to be honest, I'm a little bit shocked and to be brutally honest, disappointed with this whole, disappointed with the officer's recommendation. Out of the total grant stream, we're applying for 1.65% of eligible grant. I can tell you for a fact, there are so many sporting clubs that are in dire need of upgrades, in particular for lighting. And I'll tell you about Walter Street Reserve. Walter Street Reserve had a
Mayor, could I just raise a point of order, please?
Yes, Councillor Isa.
Could I just raise a point of order under clause 31.2 that no new matters may be raised in the right of reply?
Councillor Isa, Walter Street Reserve has, sorry, I'll have to get my wording, but no, I won't be accepting that point of order. So under 59.2, I'll be ruling against that because Walter Street Reserve has been discussed and is within the motion, so it's not new to the debate. Thank you. Councillor Bedio, if you can continue.
I was just going to say, it's disappointing. Walter Street Reserve had a lighting audit completed last April. Now, I've been in discussion quite a bit with the club down at Walter Street Reserve. And for an inner city municipality, for parents to have to drive around the oval and turn their lights on and their cars so that kids can train after 5:30 p.m. in the winter, I think is a major failing of us as a council. Now, we've known about this. We did this lighting audit at the start of last year. There's an opportunity here for one-to-one funding for lighting upgrades. Why was that not included in the officer's recommendation? I'm disappointed, I guess, in councillors for not wanting to go a little bit further and at least and push to apply for as much as possible. I understand it's a competitive process, but what happens if we don't get Hanson Reserve? We end up with nothing. Let's try and put everything on the table and see and try and at least get something out of this for our community. To be honest, I'm a little bit blown away, and I always went into this with the expectation that this might be broken up into pieces and that we could discuss. But at the end of the day, I'm only one councillor. I'm going to be continually pushing to get the most for our community organisations, and if other councillors don't want to do that, that's up to them.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Now, councillors, I'm going to put this motion to vote, and it'll generally be in twos. There are a few single ones, so it might take a little bit while, but I do believe this is the best way to go about it. So the first part of the motion that we'll be voting on is points A and points B. So point A reads, apply for 59,000 through Sport and Rec Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Community Sports Lighting Stream for the Hanson Reserve Floodlights Upgrade Project. B, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Hanson Reserve Floodlights Upgrade Project and refer the project to the 2022/2023 budget process. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. The next part that we will be voting on is point C, which is note officers will prepare other applications for the local sports infrastructure fund that are in line with council's budget and long-term capital works plan and meet the mandatory requirements for submission. All those in favour? That is, that is carried unanimously. The next point we'll be voting on is point D. Direct the CEO to apply for grants and funding opportunities which align with identified priorities endorsed by council through resolution, its advocacy strategy 2022-25, the council plan 2021-25, or the council budget and long-term capital works plan. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. I will now do item E and F together. So E reads, apply for $250,000 through Sport and Rec Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Community Facilities Stream for the Fanny Street Reserve BMX project. And F, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Fanny Street Reserve BMX project and refer the project to the 2022-23 budget process. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. We are now up to item G, and I will do G and H together. G, apply for $75,000 through Sport and Rec Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Community Sports Lighting Stream for the Walter Street Reserve Lighting Project. And H, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Walter Street Reserve Lighting Project and refer the project to the 2022-23 budget process. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Adams, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? That is Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. That motion is carried. And now I'll do I and J together. So I, apply through Sport and Rec Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Female Facilities Stream for the Overland Reserve Netball Court project. J, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Overland Reserve Netball Court project and refer the project to the 2022-23 budget process. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? It's Councillor Isa, Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation. That motion is lost. Item K and L will be done together. Apply through Sport and Rec Victoria's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund Female Friendly Facilities Stream for the Avondale Heights Tennis/Netball Courts Resurfacing Project. L, endorse in principle a co-contribution to the Avondale Heights Tennis/Netball Courts Resurfacing Project and refer to the project to the 2022/23 budget process. All those in favour? Is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Is Councillor Isa, Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation. That motion is lost. And
yeah, sorry, just maybe a point of order / point of clarification. Just wanting to clarify that the numbering is, the relettering is changed as motions are unsuccessful.
I think I've been fairly clear on what we've been voting for, so I think governance can pick up on what's okay. The intention
Just
of the vote.
Thanks.
M, request the CEO to prepare a report to council as soon as possible, but no later than May 2022, on the findings of the sporting field lighting audit report, with a view to assessing the findings against operational considerations, including intensity of use, suitability of playing services, and anticipated future demand. The report should identify any priority projects for the further preparatory work in 2021/22 in order to be shovel ready should future grant opportunities arise. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. And that's gotten to the end of the motion. We got there, guys. Okay. So that is, and apologies, I have to just grab my, go back to my meeting notes. Goodness. Apologies, councillors. Okay, we are now up to 10.6, item 11 on the agenda, which is notice of motion. And I wish to call on Councillor Isa to present a notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2022/01 Mount Alexander Road Tram Works.
I'll just wait until Councillor Video's sorted.
Oh, apologies. Sorry, Councillor Video. Oh, yep, I think he's out. Thank you, Councillor Isa.
Mayor, just before I read the motion, I know that the new rules say that the motion needs to be read without any substantial changes.
Yes.
But I just wanted to ask whether how you would view the motion just says the junction, and I really should have said Moonee Ponds Junction, and I'm just wondering if you
fine. I'll accept
might allow me to add that in.
That's fine. You can read it.
Thanks. So I just move that Council resolves to write to the Minister for Public Transport, Roads and Road Safety, the Honourable Ben Carroll, and the Member for Essendon, the Honourable Danny Pearson, to convey the difficulties experienced by residents and traders during the Mount Alexander Road tram works, with a view to improving future communications and planning for similar works. And B, receive a report from the CEO by March 2022, outlining the advisability of options for supporting the Mount Alexander Road traders from the Moonee Ponds Junction to Moultan Street, then in brackets, e.g. reimbursing footpath trading fees for part of 2021-22, waiving or reducing any other relevant council fees, and any other actions council can take to support traders, close brackets. So I was reading a different version, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Adams. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion? I'm sorry, just before you do, I'll get the timer to pop up. Beautiful. Thank you, Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, firstly, to be really clear, the improvements to the tram tracks are very welcome, and we thank all of the workers who endured really hot and dusty conditions over 24 hours for 2 weeks to improve the safety of the tracks. It was an enormous logistical undertaking. This motion is reflecting on how the experience could have been improved for traders and residents, with the intent of conveying things learnt to relevant members of Parliament for their future benefit. It's also acknowledging and recognising the very real impact and distress caused to many people over the 2-week period. Well, I've no doubt that Minister Carroll and Minister Pearson are aware of the issues, in part because I did ask the dozens of people who contacted me over the period to contact their MPs. There's great value in council formally reporting, documenting and conveying the issues to our local members, and our hope that processes may be improved following our experiences. Many of these difficulties could have been anticipated and prevented. The response of Yarra Trams to unpredictable issues that arose was not particularly nimble and flexible, and there was a real need for better capacity to adapt to the on-the-ground experiences. So the issues and learnings that could be conveyed include, or could be broadly categorised as: 1, improvements to pre-work information; 2, improvements to willingness and flexibility in adapting to conditions during works; and 3, avoiding unreasonable impacts on residents in future works. Speaking briefly to each of these, firstly, not all residents and traders seem to receive advance warning. While many did, the information came quite late. Inadequate communication and follow-up regarding waste collection, and there was inadequate directional signage for vehicles. There were no maps showing people how to get across Mount Road during the time. During the works, there was limited access points across the road, and the access point at Ailsa Street was not reliably open, causing significant difficulties because people had to travel all the way down to Multan Street to get back across. It was a really big problem that crossing wasn't open, and the response from Yarra Trans to complaints about that was not particularly flexible and responsive. Traders also had signs taken down. When they put up a sign to say, actually, the way you can get to my shop is to go this way, those signs were taken down by Yarra Trams. And I think that was another example of a lack of flexibility on the ground, Yarra Trams responding inappropriately to what traders were trying to do, which was make the best of the circumstances. And in terms of unreasonable impacts, that particularly relates to Flemington Street, who from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m, residents could not access Flemington Street by car. Now, in normal times, maybe people might have coped with that, but coming on top of lockdowns and during a heightened COVID period, people were really anxious and distressed. It had a particularly severe impact on people. I directed one poor woman who was going round in circles trying to work out how to get groceries to someone who was in isolation in COVID in there. It was really compounded by COVID, but ended up being an unreasonable impact. Emergency vehicle access was also difficult during that time. So enormous thanks to council officers who worked so hard to respond to queries and convey difficulties to Yarra Trams and seek improvements. Whilst the second part of the, while some casual conversations may have taken place conveying concerns, I think our residents and traders deserve us to take formal steps to write to MPs and document the experiences in the hope of contributing to continued improvements of the management and implementation of significant public transport upgrades. The second part of the motion is really about acknowledging the distress and impact on many traders. While some traders chose not to open, others tried to open then closed, some were hit by COVID, staff losses, some traders told me they could not afford to close for the 2 weeks and they had to persevere. And they did this with grace and resilience under very difficult circumstances. Enormous thanks to them for continuing to operate when patrons were put off by the access issues and the wire barricades. Locals are indebted to your resilience. The motion requests a report from the CEO about how best council can support traders who've been put in this situation. They weren't council works, and council doesn't compensate people per se when works impact them in local streets, but to turn a deaf ear to the distress and hardship of businesses is not satisfactory in my humble opinion. We have to be creative, supportive and recognise the impact of the works. It's disappointing that the state government doesn't provide council with any monetary support for the work that we have to do to help manage and facilitate works of this scale. One solution might be that the state government actually recognises the cost to council of large-scale transport improvements, provides us with some resources to support work of staff and to flow onto programs to support traders and residents who might have been impacted. Advocating for this recompense might not have occurred in the past, but I think it's time council started requesting recompense for the cost to the organisation of helping manage large infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, man. Thank you, Councillor Isa, for bringing this on. You've covered all of the points that I have really well in your speech. So I'll just say I absolutely support any way that we as a council can support our Mount Alexander Road traders that have experienced these recent disruptions that severely impacted businesses along this stretch after coming back post-lockdowns that were experienced in the past 2 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I just also wanted to add my thanks to Councillor Isa and Councillor Adams for moving and seconding this motion. I think it's, you know, it happened at a time where I wasn't in Melbourne and didn't experience it myself, and I really appreciate those councillors who were here and fielding those concerns and complaints, trying to get answers where we could, and the officers as well who were on board and trying to do everything they could to minimise the impacts that were being experienced. I think, you know, it's we really pride ourselves on having a really strong relationship with our local MPs, and we're very lucky to have them both as ministers and in this instance the Minister for Public Transport. So I really see this as an opportunity to continue that positive dialogue and be a part of helping them to identify, you know, what went wrong and what might be a solution in the future. So whether it's Moonee Valley or another municipality experiencing these sorts of works, there are some learnings that I think, along with the community, we can open up that constructive dialogue with our MPs through the recommendations in this NOM.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak on this? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I think all of us as councillors were contacted late last year when the traders and residents learnt about what was happening over the Christmas break. Obviously, it was a piece of infrastructure that needed upgrading. And for what I could see, Yarra Trams, well, in the conversation that I've seen between officers and Yarra Trams and the requests that were made, most, if not all, were worked out and worked through with Yarra Trams. So I thought that was a great result from what I could tell. I was considering putting up a piece of urgent business at the last council meeting, you may remember, because of the concerns that had been raised with me. But after speaking with officers, I decided not to, because officers assured me at the time that they would do everything within their power to promote what was going on down there with the wider community, with the closure, and help businesses. And our officers did just that. And I want to thank them for doing whatever they could to help the businesses and residents down there to get the message out, and thank the Mayor too, because she was involved in that also. For me, I'm not sure what exactly we are intending to getting out of writing a letter to our ministers. I'm quite sure they know what was going on. I'm quite sure both Minister Pearson and Minister Carroll were contacted constantly by traders and businesses. Writing a letter from council, in my opinion, it could, I don't know. For me, I think it puts the Mayor in a difficult position, to be honest with you, and I don't think we need to do that. I don't think we need to tell them about their concerns and ask them how they can fix it, because at the end of the day, it was infrastructure that needed to be fixed. And it was done at the time of the year when it was the most quietest, even though it was difficult. There's always difficulties, and I acknowledge that. But I won't be supporting this motion, because I don't see any benefit in writing a letter, which I don't know how it's going to be conveyed. We saw Minister Carroll yesterday. I'm quite sure some of us had conversations with him personally, and I think that's the way to do it. I don't think that we need to go down this track, so I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? No. Councillor Isa, would you like to close?
Just to reiterate a couple of things that I said before, just to respond to comments made by Councillor Sharp. The comment was made that some casual conversations were had, and just to reiterate my point that, well, there's no record of that. Those conversations won't lead to anything, and that's why I think there's value in documenting the concerns and writing formally, and I think that's why we do write formally, so that there's a record, and so that our residents can understand that we've taken their concerns seriously, rather than just have a passing casual conversation about it. The second point goes to, again, something I said about the intention of the motion, which is that it's about continuous improvement. So it's about saying, yeah, we understand these large infrastructure projects go on all the time, and they're really logistically difficult. But this was our experience. This was the experience of our residents and our traders. And here are some things that we think could improve experience for people in the future. And we're all about continuous improvement here at council, and I'm sure that the state government and their departments are as well. And also, just to reiterate another point that I made earlier, which was just that this motion is just asking for a report from the CEO about how we can best respond to the impacts on our community. It's about learning from the experiences of our community and trying to find ways of improving this in the future, and really showing our community that we have heard about the very significant impacts that they did experience during that time.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Isa, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Hodgson. All those against? That is Councillor Sharp and Councillor Byrne. That motion is carried. Item 11.2, I now call on Councillor Nation. Oh, sorry, we will wait for Councillor Video to come back in. Okay, we have Councillor Video. So item 11.2, I call on Councillor Nation to present his notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2022/02, Exploration of a Potential Grant Stream for Events in the City of Moonee Valley.
Thanks, Mayor. So I'd like to move that Council resolves to receive a report back to Council to assist with preparation of the annual budget, detailing options for a potential grant stream to support local businesses, groups or organisations to hold events in the City of Moonee Valley, with a focus on events that are open to a broad range of members from the Moonee Valley community and that have the potential to attract attendees from throughout Metropolitan Melbourne.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bedio, for seconding my motion, which, as I read, is to receive a report back to Council to assist with the preparation of our annual budget and to detail options for a new potential grant stream. So the motivation and thinking behind this motion is twofold. Firstly, it's a chance to once again celebrate events in the City of Moonee Valley. This year, 2022, is hopefully going to be the year that we open back up, a year where we can once again enjoy events with one another that we have so dearly missed over the past 18 months. I think you forget how much joy people get from interacting, coming together and celebrating a common interest, be it music, art, sports, or whatever else it may be. Here in Moonee Valley, we haven't had those opportunities. And as a council, we have had to divert most of our event funding to other areas of council, as there's been simply no capacity under rules to hold events. The second motivation behind this motion is the acknowledgement that sometimes, or probably most of the time, the best innovation, ideas, organisation and event management comes from non-government entities, quite often the private sector. And therefore, this motion is to consider enabling those individuals or operators or businesses to, in essence, through a grant stream, pitch ideas to us. And it may be that doing so, we find the next Laneway Festival or White Night or Midsummer, which with a little bit of help from our city, we can grow into an event that people in Moonee Valley love and that attracts non-Moonee Valley individuals to our city. An event that puts Moonee Valley on the map. To be honest, in the 10 years I've been on council, I can't think of too many events we have held that have done that have attracted people from throughout Melbourne. And to be honest, there's some that we have held that haven't been overly great, like the annual mayoral race day we used to hold for charity, where the running costs were greater than the money raised for charity, or the old Spirit of Moonee Valley Awards that was a 200-seat dinner that cost about $80,000. So I think about our annual Midsummer events, and we're kicking them off tomorrow with an exhibition at the Incinerated Gallery, which is great and a fantastic exhibition. And I know one of the artists, and it's going to be fantastic. But that's what we do every year. We don't necessarily think outside the box or try to innovate. Contrast that with the biggest LGBTIQA plus event from my knowledge held in our city last November, run by a private operator. And that was received so well that there's a rerun this weekend, which is another Midsummer activation. There's some things that council is really great at, and then there's other things where we probably need to piggyback off others to get the best possible result for our city. And before I hear the naysayers that arrived in my Instagram DMs saying it is not the ratepayers' job to pay private operators to hold public events in the City of Moonee Valley, I hate to tell you, that's what we've always done. The Moonee Valley Festival, we paid private operators, event management company, to run that event. That fantastic Illuminate down by the Maribyrnong River, we paid private operators a lot of money to run that event. The difference here is that instead of us going to them with an idea for a public event and paying them to run the event, we will get people to pitch ideas to us and be partners with them through a potential grant stream. City of Melbourne have been doing it for years, and other local councils do the same. We just need to think outside the box, acknowledge public events aren't our forte, and embrace 2022 with open arms or dancing arms or whatever the event is, the relevant arm movement. Councillors, I seek your support and happy in my right of reply to address any concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Nation, for bringing forward this motion. I think you can see through the notice of the motion that I raised last year, in particular 2021-05, which is developing our live music scene. I have a strong affinity with trying to promote our local event scene and trying to bring Moonee Valley into the modern metropolitan Melbourne age. I think quite often we see ourselves as an outer suburban city, but we're not. We're directly next to the city of Melbourne. And I would love to see Moonee Valley become a leading municipality that brings people from all walks of Melbourne, from all areas of Melbourne in, because what that does, Mayor, is it generates so much more for our local economy. It generates and stimulates local employment. It gets people to want to move into our city and encourages people to live in our city. So I really applaud Councillor Nation for bringing this motion to council. I also second that sometimes the private sector do things better, and we run some great events. Yesterday is a perfect example of a great event that council can run. That was a fantastic event. But sometimes you're looking at music festivals and you're looking at art festivals, that sort of thing. Sometimes the private sector do it better. They do it day in, day out. They have the expertise, they have the knowledge, they have the staff to run these events, and they can run them a lot cheaper than we can. So I think there's a lot of benefit in us, and it actually is going to it will actually cost us less in the long run if we divert some of our festival budgets into supporting and enabling the private sector to do these events for us. So I applaud Councillor Nation, and I hope all councillors support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Isa.
Thanks. And thanks, Councillor Nation, for bringing the motion. We've had a lot of motions about events and arts, and look, I'll be supporting the motion. I'll just say that up front so that there's no misunderstanding there. But as you know, I did raise with you, Councillor Nation, just some of my thinking also about perhaps the way some of this might unfold. Because we've had quite a few motions about events and live music and arts, and one of the things, and I think Councillor Bedio and I were working quite hard on this last year, is that we don't have in Moonee Valley an events framework, and I haven't been sure as to what the barriers are to our events, and my feeling was that it perhaps wasn't necessarily the access to grants, that it was perhaps a framework that gave people easy access to facilities or infrastructure or processes or approvals, and that was perhaps what we really needed to address to make those events that you speak of, and that I would love to have in Moonee Valley as well, to make them more likely to happen. So I guess we're still waiting for that to come back on the events framework. We haven't had, and I think that's coming back in the arts plan, and so that's wrapped up in there's some of the other motions about arts. So I guess it probably wouldn't disappoint me if this was also then incorporated into that thinking. So if as part of all of that reporting back on, okay, well, here's an events framework that council might be able to consider, here's a process for us putting that into place, and here's also some options for grants that may then complement that. I'd be really receptive to that all coming back as a very cohesive approach to how we might bring more events to Moonee Valley. I do also note, and I did have a quick conversation with you about this, that currently under our biannual grants, not-for-profits and or not-for-profits can apply for up to $10,000 to hold events currently in Moonee Valley. So just for anyone listening who might have an event in mind, there is that capacity currently in our event stream. I do note that the business stream is 50% of that, and it's 5,000. And I think that's what you're really trying to open up, is that I guess facilitating third parties to run successful events in Moonee Valley. So I get that, and I as you know, avid theatre and musical kind of lover, I absolutely want to see us do more of this in Moonee Valley. So yeah, happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor? Councillor Nation, would you like to close?
Thank you. Briefly, I will, and thank you, Councillor Bedio and Councillor Isa, for your comments. And I think there's a number of factors, building off the points of both, or replying to the points of both. I think there are a number of factors that have prevented private operators, other operators, to be able to connect with council and help deliver events. It probably doesn't help that our current arts and events grants don't allow anything with a commercial activities or a commercial element. Now, the reality is that be it something's ticketed or you've got a food ban or something, technically that's a commercial activity. You then look at the business grant stream, and that's got similar principles. It's less funding, but also it needs to be collaboration, and it also needs to be about beautification and not necessarily about commercial activities, which sort of goes against the purpose. So I think I definitely agree with Councillor Isa and Councillor Bedio that there are a number of these motions floating, and it probably is a little bit frustrating that we have to keep raising them, and because they're not just thought bubbles, they're things that we're so passionate about and we really want to see realised in this city. It just needs that little bit, maybe a bit more of a kick internally by us to ensure that these reports come back to us, and then we can start to make some decisions, noting that as a group we're, 14, 15 months in, for us to see things realised, the ball needs to start rolling now, because otherwise we'll be deep into year 2 or year 3, and there'll still be no traction in the event space, the art space. So I hope councillors are willing to support, and then hopefully it's not too long before a series of reports comes back to us as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. I call on Councillor Nation again to present his notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2022/03, Review of Public Art Installations in the City of Moonee Valley and Consideration of Future Installations.
Thanks, Mayor. I think you've literally read the motion there. Mayor, I move that Council resolves to receive a report back to Council reviewing current public art installations throughout the city, as well as plan future projects and potential new projects.
That's close, not exactly. Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Isa. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Isa, for seconding this motion to be heard this evening. So, as mentioned, this motion asks to receive a report back to Council reviewing current public art installations throughout our city, as well as planned future projects and potential new projects. If the past 18 months has taught us anything, it's no doubt been a newfound appreciation for our local areas. I know personally that I have discovered little green spaces, shops and cafes, just a short walk from home, that I did not know existed. Being forced into a 5-kilometre radius during the COVID lockdowns made us appreciate what is within that radius, and also made us stop and look around and discover the beauty of our local areas. For me, it also made me think about what our community appreciates and enjoys and takes pride in. And to be honest, I didn't hear too many people saying, I love that monolithic sporting pavilion that you continue to bankroll. What I did hear was people saying, I love the open spaces. I love spending time at my local park. And there were some people that said, I love what you're doing with little pieces of public art throughout the city. So it had me thinking, what are we actually doing in terms of creating more public art throughout our city, and also using public art to support our local artists? Now, in the past, we've spent money on pieces of public art that sadly made their way onto the front pages of the local leader newspaper, and were also used to scare ratepayers during election campaigns, which was quite odd because as a council and as part of our council plan, we have always had a really strong appetite to support art and artists, and it's always been there in our council plan. But for some reason, a $20,000 budget for public sculptures was absolutely slammed by ratepayers and residents and some councillors. In the same year, we spent over $8 million on sporting pavilions / pavilion refurbishments, and actually spent more than $20,000 on council catering. But it was the public art that people were saying was a waste of money. And since then, our public art initiatives have somewhat dried up. Now, we have had some lovely murals completed by those employed under the Working for Victoria scheme, but we know that that funding is concluding. We've had private operators such as Pace commission amazing new pieces of public art as part of developments. And we've also had externals such as the Royal Children's Hospital when they did the 150th year anniversary of the UU Trail, which was actually really well received throughout our city. But in terms of council-initiated projects, we probably actually haven't done a lot, and I think we can do a lot more. And so that's what this motion is asking. It's asking, what have we done? What do we plan to do? And I guess what do we as councillors need to allocate within our budget or our forthcoming budgets for this to happen? And it can start small, and I'll cite a great little project that the City of Melbourne, Yarra Trams and Melbourne Zoo did to ditch some ugly advertisements on a tram stop outside the Melbourne Zoo. They commissioned David Booth, a local artist that works under the name Ghost Patrol, to design and install a really incredible piece of art on the two tram shelters. So as people step off the tram to the zoo in whatever direction they're travelling, it's actually a really nice first experience. And because it is actually a well-known local artist, people like me will travel to a tram stop just to take a photo of the piece of art. And that's a small project. It celebrates art. It brings a sense of pride and ownership to a particular site. To be honest, I've been championing on Instagram and Art Not Ads campaign in Moonee Valley, and I know that's probably about 5 steps down the track, but we do own the infrastructure of public transport stops, so it's not that extreme to think that 1 or 2 we could look at taking that approach. So councillors, look, I ask for you to support this motion, and then while the report is being prepared over the coming months, just to think about how we could include better funding for public art in our 2022-23 annual budget, maybe even think about your ward, your suburbs, and how they could benefit from such a project. I ask you to think about how we as a council can celebrate something I know we all appreciate and enjoy that will give our community a sense of belonging, ownership and pride. And how's that for timing, Mayor?
Perfect. Spot on, Councillor Nation. Thank you. Councillor Isa.
Thanks, and thanks, Councillor Nation, for bringing this. Art it adds value in so many ways, immeasurable, really. I'm just thinking of some of the things that have gone in recently, the beautiful installations underneath I call it the urban slug, the flyover next to the housing estate in Flemington, and then the beautiful artwork around the columns and pillars there. Something as small as that brings so much joy to people, just enlivens the area and really does make an immeasurable improvement. I'm also thinking about the pocket parks that we've got the Patterson Street Pocket Park, we've got the Flemington Wellington Street pocket park, and councillors may remember that when that came I brought a notice of motion rather in December last year to just see if we could include some art in the concept design, or not include art, so I'm very tired, and make sure that there was space within the concept design for some future art projects, potentially with students at the schools nearby. So I think there are all these opportunities, small opportunities within larger projects. It might be that a sporting pavilion has the capacity to incorporate some public art, but I guess it's like environmentally sustainable design. If we always have art and climate at front of mind, we can find opportunities for incorporating that into sort of our business as usual. So I would be really pleased to see local artists and supported particularly, and us celebrate their creativity and their endeavours and their immense contribution to society.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Nation. I really feel you're channeling me tonight, because exactly a year ago, well, nearly a year ago today, on the 28th of Jan, I moved a very similar motion, 2021-06, developing our street art scene. So I definitely support the need to push in for officers and for council to look into ways that we can develop our street art. But on that as well, I do want to raise, we brought this up a year ago, and I really haven't seen much of a change or much of a change in approach to how we can further develop our street art. I know we have a arts and culture plan coming up, and that's going to be key, and that's really ingrained in our council plan for 2021 to 2025. And I really just want to urge officers, clearly art and events are a priority for this council, and I just really hope in this council year we can start to see some progress on that as we're opening up, as people are going to be going outside. We need to be making sure that we're doing these things. People are asking for them. Now, I'm not saying let's install one of those banana statues like the controversial statue in Brunswick Street, but at the same time, art's subjective, and I personally would love to see some bizarre and interesting pieces of art. So yeah, I definitely support this, and I would urge all councillors to support this one as well.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Nation, would you like to close?
Again, thank Councillor Isa and Councillor Bedio for their comments. And look, I'll just leave you with an example of about 10 years ago, I think it was out in Northam, that someone came up with the idea, let's just paint a giant piece of art on a silo. Something no one had ever thought of it, and they did it, and it's now a silo art trail that people drive everywhere from Rochester to where was I the other day, just out the back of Mortlake, to see these pieces of public art. So it's thinking about ways of bringing something that we all love and we've all spoken so passionately about in our time on council, and actually putting a little bit of money into it. And I think that's why I want us to think about what we can do, what potential new projects there are, and then if there is appetite to then ensure when we sit around and decide on future budgets that we're appreciating art as much as we appreciate sport, as much as we're appreciating so much of what council does. So again, hopefully this is one of a number of reports that comes back to us shortly, and we can start to see some action in this space. On a closing note, my brother has just told me that the soccer is well and truly finished and he's on his way home, so I definitely won't be making the soccer.
Did your brother tell you the score? I didn't ask that, Councillor Nathan.
4-0 soccer is over Vietnam.
I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, the next item on the agenda is urgent business. Councillor, do we have any urgent business tonight? No. And we also, item 13 is confidential reports, and we don't have any confidential reports. So we now come to the close of the meeting. Thank you for everybody for tuning in. Unfortunately, obviously, we are back on Zoom, and we'll probably be back on Zoom for a little while, but we still can see you out in various events. It's been mentioned in this council meeting, obviously, before, but our Midsummer program is kicking off tomorrow night at the Incinerator Gallery. So it opens at 6. I hope to see heaps and heaps of people down there in a very COVID-friendly, safe way. Yeah, so thank you, everyone. Good night, and I hope you enjoyed the meeting.